Zhou Weiqing trudged through the forest angrily as he complained about the hypocrisy of the members of the assassin camp. Beside him were Binger and the two ice snow bears. He was convinced that all of them were liars, and was determined never to trust another word any of them spoke. Binger was beside him and lightly chuckled, telling him that he had already done enough sulking for a day. She reminded him that their commander had already made plans for them outside the camp to gain experience, considering that they were already old enough. With Binger's last statement, Zhou Weiqing jumped at the opportunity to goof off and playfully asked if they were old enough to get married. He said giving birth to a new generation of successors seemed like a good life experience to him. Binger naturally disagreed while blushing and frowning at the same time. In response, Zhou Weiqing playfully teased her for being shy and said they should already be considering marriage. Binger was flustered and said she never agreed to any such thing, but had merely been referring to future events. As much as the idea made her blush, she reminded Zhou Weiqing about the marriage contract between himself and the princess. In response, Zhou Weiqing said that since he and Binger spent 2 years at the assassin camp, his first order of business would be breaking off the engagement by dissuading his godfather, the emperor. Binger playfully stuck out her tongue before turning serious the next moment and saying that their commander had proposed something for their next journey. She explained that in the next 5 months, there would be a selection exam at the Fei Li Imperial Military Academy for the enlistment of new students. Considering Zhou Weiqing and herself were both at the age for enlistment, their commander suggested that they should both enroll. While Zhou Weiqing listened to her with keen interest, Binger continued to explain that the Fei Li Empire was known for its size and prosperity. Therefore, the couple needed to work diligently and prepare to join the military academy. The same was also the intention of Zhou Weiqing's father. However, it was still early in the year and they both needed to return home. Zhou Weiqing recalled that he still had an appointment with Master Hu Yan as per their earlier agreement. Afterward, he turned to the two ice snow bears, who eagerly gazed at him. Zhou Weiqing needed to do something about the bears, considering that they were returning to the city. He knew that the two meatheads would definitely arouse suspicion if they were not somehow concealed. Moreover, he had no idea how they had grown so big in only 2 years. In contrast, Fatty Cat had not even grown an inch. Zhou Weiqing wondered about Fatty Cat's origin and the secret she was hiding. 2 years ago, Fatty Cat had transformed and instantly outgrew even the two ice snow bears before him. Without a second thought, Zhou Weiqing stretched out his hand and activated his space ring. Its aura engulfed the two bears, who vanished in the blink of an eye. Zhou Weiqing smiled contentedly because of the versatility of his space ring. Before long, he and Binger returned to their hometown. After seeing Binger off, Zhou Weiqing went straight home, where his mother happily welcomed him. The boy rested for 2 days, and on the third, he ventured alone to the emperor's palace. Zhou Weiqing could not wait to cancel his engagement to Princess Di Fuya so that he could marry Binger. The emperor's voice reverberated outside the palace hall. He had a furious expression as he declined to annul the engagement between his daughter and godson. The latter awkwardly tried to appease the emperor. He apologized for disappointing his godfather before explaining that the princess had no affection toward him. Moreover, Zhou Weiqing confessed that he felt unworthy of her. The emperor immediately snapped at him, questioning the boy's latter statement, considering it was he, the emperor, who had made the arrangement. The boy was alarmed that he might have actually offended his godfather. The latter finally inquired whether the boy made the decision after the princess attempted to kill him, and whether Zhou Weiqing bore a grudge against her. Before the boy could reply, the emperor stubbornly explained that he could do nothing about the incident. However, the arranged marriage was a promise he had made between himself and Zhou Weiqing's father. Therefore, it could not be revoked. The emperor spoke while the boy did nothing but gaze at him helplessly. Emperor Diling Feng had watched Zhou Weiqing grow into the man he had become, and in many ways, the boy was like a son to him. On the other hand, the person Zhou Weiqing feared to disappoint the most was his godfather. The emperor's determination made Zhou Weiqing sigh. Despite his reluctance, he finally decided to reveal the truth. He boldly faced the emperor and admitted that there was already someone else he liked. This bold declaration momentarily stunned the emperor, who then chided the boy for trying to make a fool out of him. He accused Zhou Weiqing of impulsively making a lame excuse to escape the marriage contract. In response, Zhou Weiqing's expression became serious, and he explained to his godfather that he had no intention of lying. The boy passionately confessed that there was no other woman in his heart other than the one he liked, and was determined to marry her alone. As the emperor gazed at Zhou Weiqing, he realized that the boy spoke the truth, because the latter would actively avoid eye contact whenever he lied. However, Emperor Diling Feng was not discouraged, and only lamented his inability to marry the two youngsters. Earlier, he realized that it was already too late to argue with Zhou Weiqing because the boy was already a heavenly jewel master and a rare talent. Even so, he was still determined to have his daughter marry his godson. This time, the emperor attempted a different approach. He explained to the boy that a man's charm came from his confidence, and confidence came from strength. Considering that the boy was still clueless about the power of a heavenly jewel master, the emperor explained that it was not uncommon for talented young men to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. The statement left Zhou Weiqing bewildered. While he was still gathering his thoughts, the emperor turned away from him and left. Zhou Weiqing was taken aback by his godfather's cunning suggestion. It then dawned on him that he had been played, and he tried to reject the suggestion. In response, the emperor gave him a stern look before ranting about how he had already made a compromise by allowing the boy to take other women, yet Zhou Weiqing still intended to bargain with him. Zhou Weiqing was frustrated by how unreasonable his godfather was being, and helplessly sighed. Before the emperor left, he revealed that Princess Di Fuya would also be attending the Feili Imperial Military Academy and would be the boy's classmate. The emperor hoped that the two would get along because, after graduation, he would personally wed them. The emperor then snorted inwardly and walked away. Zhou Weiqing was left wondering why his godfather was so dead set on the marriage. Having witnessed the man's stubbornness in full display, the boy wondered whether that was what was considered an emperor's pride. Afterward, he wondered how he would explain the failed mission to Binger. At that moment, something occurred to Zhou Weiqing. The emperor had revealed that the princess would also be attending the military academy. She did not like him, neither did he care for her. Therefore, Zhou Weiqing planned to make the princess resent him more so that she would be forced to beg her father to annul the engagement. After all, the matter concerned the both of them, and he should not be the only one pulling his weight. Sometime later, Zhou Weiqing went to visit Binger. He admired her from afar as she and her mother picked some fruits in their garden. The sight caused him to reflect on his desire to marry Binger, buy a small farmhouse, and even grow crops in their fields. He stood on the outer side of the fence when Tang Xian, Binger's mother, snapped him out of his thoughts by asking whether he intended to come in, and also why he had such a smug smile. Binger, on the other hand, was excited to see her boyfriend as the latter stepped through the entrance and awkwardly greeted his future mother-in-law. Tang Xian used the opportunity to mention that Binger had informed her about his impending departure to the Feili Empire's capital. Zhou Weiqing confirmed the report with a bright smile before explaining that Master Huyan had accepted him as a disciple and would be studying the creation of consolidating equipment scrolls. At that moment, the air around Tang Xian changed drastically. She stated that there were 2 things that Zhou Weiqing needed to keep in mind. While the boy gave her a curious look, Tang Xian continued to say that first, the boy should spend less time and effort on creating consolidating equipment scrolls, and secondly, when storing skills in his elemental jewels, he ought to acquire as many control skills as possible. However, he should not focus exclusively on any of them. Tang Xian then asked whether the boy understood her. In response, Zhou Weiqing admitted that he needed to clearly understand the second point. He then inquired about the need to acquire multiple control skills. Tang Xian calmly explained that the darkness attribute that Zhou Weiqing possessed was superior in control skills. However, once it was used, it had a cooldown time of 10 seconds. Zhou Weiqing confirmed with keen interest. During the cooldown period, the skill would be completely unusable. Tang Xian continued to explain that the 10-second cooldown was more than sufficient to change fate, and to determine life and death dozens of times over. She then explained that if the boy could gain as many control skills as possible, he would be able to suppress any opponent indefinitely. She wore a cunning expression and a knowing smile as she revealed that if each attribute in the boy's possession stored 1 skill, his multiple attributes would allow him to acquire numerous skills. Therefore, it was entirely possible for one to wield the power of an entire battalion without relying on others. After the detailed explanation, Zhou Weiqing beamed excitedly because he realized the potential of his heavenly jewels. He thanked Tang Xian and promised to acquire as many control skills as possible from then on. Afterward, Tang Xian tossed something to Zhou Weiqing. The boy caught it and realized it was a ring. Tang Xian explained that it was a camouflage ring that could conceal the boy's Alexandrite cat's eye jewels by masking their appearance. She then casually stated that she gave him the ring for Binger's sake. Her words made Zhou Weiqing giddy, and he wondered whether it was a gift from Binger, or whether his future mother-in-law had finally softened up toward him. However, he did not hesitate to equip the ring immediately. Afterward, Tang Xian glared at the boy coldly before warning him that if she ever found out that he hurt Binger in any way, she would take back both the ring and his life. The threat left Zhou Weiqing a bit stunned as he watched Tang Xian walk toward the house. Fortunately, the gesture was not lost on the boy. He acknowledged how blessed he was to have a woman like Binger beside him, Once Tang Xian was back inside the house, Binger sat down with Zhou Weiqing and leaned on his shoulder as he told her about the situation in the palace. Afterward, Binger asked whether the boy's godfather, the emperor, had rejected his request despite Zhou Weiqing's determination to cancel the engagement. In response, the latter replied that he did not care and would rather die than marry that witch. He declared that neither his father, Admiral Zhou, nor his godfather, the emperor, would force him. Zhou Weiqing then said Binger was 10,000 times better than the princess before taking her hand into his own. They briefly enjoyed the blissful silence before Binger suddenly recalled that she had something to say. She suggested that Zhou Weiqing should leave for Feituo City alone this time because she wanted to stay home and spend more time with her mother. Zhou Weiqing immediately protested, claiming that her suggestion was a bit too cruel. He pointed out that if they did not leave together, they would see each other again after 5 months. In response, Binger explained with teary eyes that she could not bear to part from him. However, the consecutive years she had spent at the assassin camp without ever visiting home was not fair to her mother, who lived alone. Binger wanted to spend more time with her before she had to leave again. Zhou Weiqing sighed deeply because he could understand her feelings. He held Binger close and assured her that he did not wish to sabotage her relationship with her mother, before acknowledging that Binger's mother must have missed her a lot. Moreover, he asked Binger to visit his mother when he was away. Since they were about to part for a long time, Zhou Weiqing stayed with Binger a little longer, and even gave her the storage ring, which contained the 2 ice snow bears. The following day, Zhou Weiqing bid his mother and Binger farewell, before embarking on his journey to the Fei Li Empire. Zhou Weiqing's figure was blurred as he sped toward his destination. He was using his wind attribute to increase his speed many times over. 7 days later, the boy arrived at Feituo City in Master Huyan's courtyard. He took a moment to look at the surroundings while recalling that it had been 2 years since his last visit to the place. The nostalgic moment was instantly cut short by Master Huyan's bellowing laughter. The man proudly announced that he had finally completed something he had been working on for the past 2 years. He was proud to have accomplished something that only Grandmaster-level consolidating equipment scroll masters could. Zhou Weiqing stood outside and wondered what the commotion was all about. Judging by what he had heard Master Huyan say, the boy wondered if the man had acquired a fantastic piece of new equipment right at the moment he had arrived. Indeed, it had to be a coincidence. Inside the house, Senior Wind and Master Huyan admired an object in the latter's hands that shone with a bright golden radiance. Master Huyan proudly admired his creation and commented about how much heavier it was compared to some of the best equipment scrolls. He intended to have Zhou Weiqing take a look at it when he arrived. Master Huyan had barely finished speaking when Zhou Weiqing appeared behind him like a phantom. The boy was filled with curiosity and asked whether the object was meant for him. His sudden appearance almost made Master Huyan jump out of his skin. Master Huyan nearly popped a vein as he furiously complained about how much the boy's arrival had scared him. When he asked why the boy had not knocked, Zhou Weiqing said that he had done so, but no one answered. Therefore, he let himself in. Master Huyan quickly dismissed the matter and promptly asked the boy to take a look at his latest creation. Zhou Weiqing cheerfully glanced at the trinket between his fingers, which was the size of a button. He asked whether Master Huyan had made it for him. The tiny object seemed so intricate that the boy asked what its purpose was. With a smug expression, Master Huyan stated that the boy was lucky to have a master such as himself, before revealing that the tiny object was known as a socketing scroll. He ventured on to explain that the boy's current overload bow possessed only 1 socket. Therefore, with his latest creation, Zhou Weiqing could add 1 more socket to the weapon. Master Huyan further explained that the socketing scroll was a priceless object, and one could not simply buy it even if one wanted to. He then revealed that a nearby auction house had recently sold one of them for 1 million gold coins. Zhou Weiqing was stunned by the mention of the obscene amount of gold. He gazed at the socketing scroll in his hands and shuddered before saying it was too expensive. He also felt guilty for accepting it so casually. Master Huyan laughed heartily and said it was the first time he had seen the boy so flustered. Afterward, he encouraged Zhou Weiqing to accept it because it was a generous gift from his master. Master Huyan then sighed and said that it was a pity that he was not an elite noble. Otherwise, he would have had access to the resources needed to make an overlord bow with 2 sockets directly. Moreover, he would never have relied on socketing scrolls. At that moment, the boy kowtowed to his master in sincere gratitude. He then swore on his heavenly jewels that he would do his utmost to become the best consolidating equipment scroll master according to his master's wishes. The boy's sudden vow shocked Master Huyan, who asked the boy why he had made such an impulsive oath. At that moment, he noticed that the boy had acquired another set of jewels. Master Huyan was surprised and asked Zhou Wei King to reveal his current cultivation base. In response, the boy admitted he was currently at Heavenly Energy Stage 11. He had broken through 6 times in the past 2 years. The boy's astonishing cultivation speed shocked the man. When Senior Wind asked what the latter thought about the boy's talent, Master Huyan sighed reluctantly before admitting that it was unfortunate because he had hoped that the boy would inherit his title and mantle. However, with Zhou Wei King's talent, he was sure to become an incredible heavenly jewel master, and studying the creation of consolidating equipment scrolls would be a waste of extraordinary talent. With a slight smile, Zhou Wei King reminded Master Huyan that he had already made an oath and would never go back on his word. Moreover, he had decided to acknowledge Master Huyan as his teacher. The boy then speculated that, with enough training, he would become a peerless talent in the field. Therefore, he urged his master to begin training him right away. Master Huyan said the lessons would start the following day. However, for that moment, he wanted the boy to make use of the socketing scroll. Zhou Wei King nodded in agreement, and with one fluid motion, he summoned the Overlord Bow. Afterward, he carefully followed Master Huyan's instructions and released his heavenly energy into the socketing scroll, which began glowing vivaciously. At the moment the scroll met with the bow, it molded into its shape. The boy was amazed by the sudden transformation. However, he kept hold of his Overlord Bow and watched as it gradually vanished. Master Huyan explained that the sudden disappearance of the Overlord Bow meant that the merge was successful. He reminded the boy not to summon the weapon for a few days. When asked why, the old master explained that although the Overlord Bow now possessed 2 sockets, the fusion was not yet stable, therefore the boy ought not to use the weapon too soon. Zhou Wei King chuckled excitedly as he clenched his fists and thanked the master. After upgrading the bow, Zhou Wei King explained to Master Huyan that he had other reasons for visiting the Fei Li Empire. He intended to take the entrance exam at the military academy, which would be held in 5 months. Afterward, Huyan Aobo asked the boy to rest, considering his long journey, and said they would begin their lessons the following day. Zhou Wei King stepped into Master Huyan's workshop the next day. He scanned the room and saw neatly arranged texts, manuals, and writing material. Right then, Master Huyan asked him to settle down so that they could begin the first lesson. During the course of the following week, Huyan Aobo did not withhold any of his experiences and shared them with Zhou Wei King, which allowed the boy to learn through practical experience. His teacher patiently explained the basic theory behind consolidating equipment. He taught about the material properties of various combinations that one ought to be familiar with. Master Huyan was a proficient teacher, and his explanations were simple for Zhou Wei King to comprehend. Within 1 week, the boy had wholly mastered the basic theory of consolidation, and his knowledge and proficiency grew as the weeks passed by. Although the sheer volume of information he had to absorb was enormous and intimidating, Zhou Wei King was not a fool. His tenacity and patience helped him cope with the pressure. After he had mastered the theory, he moved on to making scrolls. On his first attempt, Zhou Wei King did not dare act arrogant and complacent, but decided to play it safe. Therefore, he chose a simple design of a turtle shell shield. He was determined to remain focused when he began making an inscription. When the scroll erupted into flames, Zhou Wei King cursed his terrible luck. Fortunately, Master Huyan was nearby and took care of the damage while informing the boy that the gel paper fluid cost about 10 gold coins. In response, Zhou Wei King shuddered at how expensive the primary material was. He then admitted to his master that he finally understood why the latter's prices for consolidating equipment scrolls were so high. Moreover, he found them to be reasonable. Zhou Wei King's frustration worsened with each subsequent failure. The gel papers continually burst into flames, while the boy held their smoldering remains. He vented his frustration about how challenging the turning point was. All it took was a slight decrease in the speed of the brush, and all his efforts failed. Master Huyan, who stood beside him, commented that another 10 gold coins had been burnt away. He then turned to leave the workshop before urging the boy to take his time when crafting consolidating equipment scrolls. The craft required a lot of patience, and he would be the first to take a break. Zhou Wei King glanced gloomily at the remains of his previous failed attempts, and deeply pondered, trying to find a solution. He acknowledged the problematic nature of creating scrolls, and how any slight hesitation would cause the gel fluid to evaporate. It was more so with the fine brush strokes wherein any slight deviation from the design resulted in total failure. It was challenging for Zhou Wei King to discern the precise moment to slow down the tip of the pen. Right then, he had an idea, and his face instantly brightened. Zhou Wei King understood that the one thing he sorely lacked was time. He theorized that if he used his time attribute, he could slightly slow down time. Moreover, if he used his ability at the moment when the speed of his brush changed, he would be able to control his pace and avoid making mistakes. With newfound determination, Zhou Weiqing was eager to test his theory. A moment later, he started anew and saturated the pen with the energy of his time attribute. He then proceeded as before, and his brush followed the stencil design. However, this time around, when the speed of his brush stroke changed, he slowed the flow of time to gain better control of the brush. The outcome was just as he had expected. The brush became much steadier, and Zhou Weiqing felt his precision increase drastically. Afterward, his eyes widened with excitement because his new method had actually worked. By slowing down time, he did not have to worry about making careless mistakes anymore. Moreover, judging by his reserves of heavenly energy, he ought to be able to use his ability about 7 or 8 more times consecutively. Unfortunately, Zhou Weiqing was so distracted by his discovery that he forgot to lift his brush. He failed to recover his expended heavenly energy with the last stroke, and his heavenly energy could no longer support the time skill. As a result, the scroll was ruined once again. Despite experiencing this latest failure, his efforts were fruitful. While he recovered his heavenly energy, Zhou Weiqing recalled all the minute movements and feelings he experienced from his previous attempt. Armed with the newfound knowledge, he immediately began anew once his energy reserves had been restored. On his subsequent effort, the boy's hand was steadier than before. There was not a single error in the entire process, and when he completed the final stroke, the scroll emitted a brilliant golden light, which was an indication of success. Zhou Weiqing held the completed scroll and declared himself a prodigy, having succeeded on his 4th attempt. Master Huyan had revealed that with each successful scroll made, the success rate of the subsequent ones would increase. Sure enough, after a quick recovery, Zhou Weiqing got back to work and successfully produced many other consolidating equipment scrolls. With the time, space, and wind attributes at his disposal, the boy's success rate quickly skyrocketed, and his production speed also increased rapidly. Later that evening, Master Huyan returned to the workshop to inform the boy it was time to take a break, and that it was also dinner time. As expected, he found Zhou Weiqing fast asleep on the floor and concluded it was due to the latter's exhaustion from heavily expending his heavenly energy. Master Huyan was content to know that the boy was not lazying around. Suddenly, something unexpectedly caught his eye. He noticed that the floor was littered with consolidating equipment scrolls, and each of them had a faint glow, which was a sign that they had been successfully crafted. At that moment, Master Huyan could no longer contain his shock and exclaimed loudly. His voice rang outside the workshop and into the surrounding courtyard, when suddenly, Senior Wind rushed to his side. The bodyguard asked what had happened and if his boss had broken something. However, he was surprised that nothing was amiss. Master Huyan was keenly examining the completed consolidating equipment scrolls, and beside him was Zhou Weiqing, who had been woken up by the commotion. Master Huyan's face was drenched in sweat as he trembled with excitement and disbelief. Senior Wind cautiously approached his boss and asked what the latter had in his hands. At first, the scrolls in Master Huyan's hands seemed ordinary. However, upon closer inspection, Senior Wind asked whether the master had made the scrolls. Reality gradually dawned on him, and he too could no longer contain his shock. Master Huyan simply nodded in response while still in disbelief. All the scrolls before the 2 men had been completed by the boy. Moreover, he had achieved a success rate of 80% on his first day. In response, Senior Wind exclaimed that the boy was nothing short of a monster, and congratulated his boss for having struck gold by accepting Zhou Weiqing as an apprentice. Once the shock had subsided, Zhou Weiqing explained to the 2 seniors that there was a secret behind his success. He then revealed his elemental jewels before explaining that during his last visit 2 years ago, he had yet to identify all of his attributes. Therefore, he did not mention it. The time attribute was one of the 3 saint-ranked attributes, superior to all others. In response, Master Huyan excitedly exclaimed that his apprentice not only possessed the space and wind attributes in his elemental jewels, but also the time attribute. He could not believe his luck as a teacher. Zhou Weiqing chuckled in response, and smugly explained that he had simply tested his theory, and had not expected it to work at all. Suddenly, Master Huyan ordered the boy to kneel before him. The drastic change in the mood caught Zhou Weiqing off guard, and he questioned his master's words. Master Huyan sternly repeated the order, commanding the boy to kneel. Zhou Weiqing glanced at the old man for a moment before reluctantly complying. Senior Wind also wondered about Master Huyan's intentions. However, what happened next surprised him. Master Huyan suddenly gave the boy a big hug. 4 months later, while at his master's workshop, Zhou Weiqing excitedly announced that he had completed 392 sets of consolidated equipment scrolls, each comprising 1,000 pieces. Master Huyan was thrilled and proud of the boy's achievements over the 4 months. He was confident that the new batch of merchandise would keep their reserves stocked for years. A brilliant light illuminated his face as he examined one of the completed sets, and he commented on the remarkably high quality of the scrolls crafted by Zhou Weiqing as a beginner. Upon discovering Zhou Weiking's time attribute, Master Huyan arranged special training for him. Consequently, for the remaining 4 months of his training, Zhou Weiqing was assigned the task he had just completed. The boy faced an abrupt increase in workload, leaving him with only 2 hours a day to spare. All these hours were devoted to studying theory under the master, with the remainder dedicated to crafting the scrolls. Due to his inexperience with unfamiliar designs and his time attribute, Zhou Weiqing rarely encountered failures in production. Upon successfully completing the design of a new scroll, Zhou Weiqing never faltered on the same design again. Furthermore, with each successive scroll, he not only maintained his success, but also increased his speed, completing them faster than the previous ones. His master trembled with excitement, realizing he had found a money-printing machine with the boy's remarkable speed and success rate. Observing Zhou Weiking's finished work, Master Huyan remarked that he had nothing more to teach the boy. In the 4 months of training, Zhou Weiqing had absorbed all of his master's knowledge. Master Huyan added that the remaining lessons for Zhou Weiqing would come through experience. Expressing gratitude, Zhou Weiqing thanked his master for the training he had received. Master Huyan, however, clarified that it wasn't solely out of the goodness of his heart. Now that the boy had inherited his knowledge, he bore the responsibility of fulfilling his master's dream, to become a high-level consolidating equipment scroll master and reach heights that Master Huyan himself could not attain. The old man commented that the boy possessed many advantages that would aid him on his journey. He expressed a hope that Zhou Weiqing wouldn't devote excessive time to scroll making, but instead focus on cultivating himself and reaching greater heights of power. Master Huyan was convinced that Zhou Weiqing had the potential to become a prodigious jewel master, and it would be a shame to waste such talent. Subsequently, he advised the boy to allocate only 1 hour each day for making scrolls. Zhou Weiqing responded with a confident smile, assuring his master that he would not be disappointed. As they looked back at the completed sets of scrolls, Master Huyan expressed contentment with the boy's attitude. He stated that the 392 sets of scrolls served as the boy's tuition fees. Witnessing this sudden change in his master's demeanor, Zhou Weiqing was taken aback and disapprovingly questioned whether his master intended to hoard everything. In response, Master Huyan argued that he had expended all his savings in training the boy, and it was natural for him to expect something in return. However, Zhou Weiqing didn't give up. He asked if his master could spare him a few scrolls because he too needed the money. Master Huyan dismissed Zhou Weiking's request, criticizing him for attempting to bargain, and casually tossed a necklace toward the boy. Zhou Weiqing caught the necklace and examined the crystalline pendant attached to it. He recognized that it was a space storage tool, worth around 300 scrolls. He knew that his master never did anything without purpose. Curious, the boy asked if there was a gift for him inside the necklace. Master Huyan confirmed this, and mysteriously mentioned that the necklace contained something personal, before reminding Zhou Weiqing about the legendary consolidating equipment kit. His words instantly captured the boy's attention. Master Huyan explained that inside the necklace were design stencils belonging to the legendary kit. They included 10 sets of designs, each set comprising 10 scrolls. It was then revealed that the creator of the kit was a god-tier consolidating equipment scroll master. Zhou Weiking's eyes widened in profound realization. Master Huyan disclosed that the creator was one of his ancestors, who unfortunately succumbed to exhaustion after completing the last piece. The latter's legacy had been passed down through 21 generations over the last 1100 years. Master Huyan then expressed regret that even he could not continue the lineage. However, he felt fortunate to have met Zhou Weiqing, whom he believed to be the most promising individual he had encountered in the last 1,000 years. Master Huyan's bold claim momentarily stunned Zhou Weiqing. Moreover, the man explained that the kit was designed for those with a strength affinity, which meant it was practically tailor-made for the boy. Zhou Weiqing smiled hesitantly at his master's conviction before expressing skepticism by asking whether no other god-tiered scroll master had appeared in the 1,000 years the legendary set had existed. Curious about Master Huyan's predecessor and whether there had been any progress, Zhou Weiqing wondered aloud. However, Master Huyan casually denied any advancement. When the boy inquired about the reason, Master Huyan attributed it to financial insufficiency, explaining that the required materials for the scrolls were incredibly rare. Master Huyan clarified that each set demanded hundreds of trial scrolls to ensure success. He recounted a past instance where an individual successfully completed the first set of 10, but immediately fell into poverty. The colossal amount of money needed for such endeavors left Zhou Weiking's face dotted with beads of sweat. When he questioned why Master Huyan believed he was likely to succeed where no one had in the past millennium, Zhou Weiqing learned that it was due to his remarkably high success rate in making scrolls. Master Huyan emphasized the fact that Zhou Weiqing needed only one trial scroll to comprehend a design, a feat considered impossible by others. Convinced that no one else in the world possessed such ability, Master Huyan eagerly looked forward to the day Zhou Weiqing would become a legend. On that anticipated day, Master Huyan envisioned proudly boasting that he was the boy's master. Inspired by the old man's confidence, Zhou Weiqing took on the determined expression of a young man ready for the challenging journey of becoming the ultimate scroll master. He promised that one day, he would reveal to his master what all 10 sets of consolidating equipment looked like. At the conclusion of the arduous 4 months, Zhou Weiqing finally had the opportunity to get some much-needed rest. The intensive training under Huyan Aobo pushed him to his limits. As the boy lay on his bed, Fatty Cat curled up on top of him. The wise little cub detected a subtle change in Zhou Weiqing, whose skin gradually flushed red, a sign that he had come down with a fever. Feeling the sudden heat wave, Zhou Weiqing began to wonder what was wrong with him. He then tossed and turned on his bed, complaining about the discomfort. The commotion forcefully evicted Fatty Cat from the bed, and she landed on the floor beside the boy. She was alarmed while gazing at Zhou Weiqing, but her view was obstructed by his covers, which had suddenly flown toward her. At that moment, Zhou Weiqing undressed his torso in an attempt to mitigate the heat. A swirling mass of dark aura surrounded his body like a maelstrom, while Zhou Weiqing gritted his teeth in pain. Although the boy had not cultivated in the past 4 months, he had absorbed an immense amount of natural energy through the creation of the scrolls. As a result, the heavenly energy in his body had accumulated to a critical point. When he finally had the chance to completely relax his body, a sudden surge of heavenly energy overwhelmed him, uncontrollably forcing a breakthrough in cultivation. The violent commotion caught the attention of Master Huyan and Senior Wind, prompting them to burst into the boy's room to investigate. The boy crouched on his bed, overwhelmed by the surging heavenly energy. Senior Wind halted Master Huyan, instinctively approaching Zhou Weiqing to offer assistance. However, Senior Wind warned the old man to stay away, as Zhou Weiqing's dantian was on the verge of exploding, rendering any interference ineffective. In that critical moment, Master Huyan looked helplessly at the boy, blaming himself for pushing his apprentice too hard. Suddenly, Zhou Weiqing raised his head, his face contorted into a feral expression, and his eyes glowed brightly with the surging heavenly energy. Fatty Cat noticed this abrupt change and intervened. A dark aura surged around the boy while a crimson one surrounded the little cub. She immediately transformed into her larger form, leaving Master Huyan and Senior Wind in shock. They questioned whether the beast before them was the same little white tiger cub they knew. Fatty Cat pinned Zhou Weiqing down with her paws as both of their auras surged violently. Senior Wind realized that the white tiger was attempting to help the boy, who had transformed into his demonic form with dark patterns on his skin. Suddenly, Zhou Weiqing roared loudly. At that moment, Fatty Cat's eyes glowed bright purple. She shot the purple energy into Zhou Weiqing's eyes. Her roars became rhythmic and monotonous, as though speaking in an ancient tongue. Numerous mysterious symbols condensed from Fatty Cat's purple aura lingered above her body and gradually merged into a central form. The two men watched this incredible spectacle as a domineering golden symbol appeared, illuminating the entire room. The symbol suddenly split into two, with each half forming the word King, before shooting into Zhou Weiqing's and Fatty Cat's foreheads. Senior Wind was still in shock, and asked Old Man Huyan if he had any idea what had just happened. In response, the old man claimed that he had never seen such a thing in all his years. However, the aura of the white tiger was bizarre yet familiar. At that point, Feng Yu covered the old man's mouth, cautioning him against speaking another word, as what Master Huyan was about to say could bring disaster to them all. After a while, the violent surge of heavenly energy around Zhou Weiqing had calmed down. Moreover, the black markings on his face and body gradually vanished. Afterward, Fatty Cat reverted to her cub form. Master Huyan was relieved because the boy's breathing finally stabilized. Zhou Weiqing had finally achieved a breakthrough. The aura around him coalesced centripetally into a strange vortex within him. This vortex positioned itself between the other 11 acupuncture points and began absorbing natural energy at an incredible rate. Fatty Cat and Master Huyan observed yet another change in the boy. His heavenly jewels emerged. However, this time, there were 3 of each set of jewels, indicating that Zhou Weiqing's cultivation had broken through and increased once more. He had finally condensed his 3rd jewel. A few days later, Zhou Weiqing kowtowed to his master, expressing deep gratitude for the care and guidance he had received. In response, Master Huyan urged him to hurry, lest he miss the academy's registration deadline. The boy's cultivation deviation and subsequent breakthrough had already delayed him by a few days. Zhou Weiqing replied confidently, assuring his master that he would make the old man's dream come true. As they spoke, Fatty Cat peeked through her favorite hiding spot. Master Huiyan's eyes welled up with tears, and he immediately turned away, bidding the boy goodbye and promising to visit him at school if he found the time. Zhou Weiqing had seen through his master's tough act, bidding him farewell one more time before departing. Observing the boy's fading silhouette, Huyan Aobo admitted to Feng Yu that Zhou Weiqing was his pride and joy. Feng Yu teased the old man, asking if his words had been truthful and why he had not asked Zhou Weiqing to stay. In response, Master Huyan explained that he could not be selfish. Zhou Weiqing's talents surpassed what he could teach, and the boy was better off honing his skills outside. Feng Yu teased the old man for growing soft, but the latter vehemently denied it. When Zhou Weiqing left, he immediately tested his power with his 3-jeweled cultivation, running like greased lightning. The quality of his heavenly energy had upgraded, emanating as a white mist from his body when he wasn't using his jewels. All that Zhou Weiqing knew about his breakthrough was that Fatty Cat once again helped him. Huyan Aobo and Feng Yu were both reluctant to talk about it, so the boy did not pry any further. After a few days of traveling, Zhou Weiqing was astonished by the swift recovery of his heavenly energy. His non-stop running barely consumed any heavenly energy. This prompted him to decide to increase his speed once more. In the subsequent days, from dusk to dawn, Zhou Weiqing's schedule devolved to simply eating, sleeping, and running. To be on the safe side, he disguised his elemental jewels using the camouflage ring, considering the many attributes in his possession that could easily attract unsavory intentions. Finally, after 14 days of arduous travel, Zhou Weiqing arrived at Feili Imperial Capital City. Upon reaching the city, he marveled at its enormity compared to his hometown. Experiencing a large town for the first time, he inwardly acknowledged that the place lived up to its title as one of the top 10 cities in the boundless mainland. Recalling that the population of Feili Imperial Capital City alone exceeded that of the entire Heavenly Bow Empire, the boy took his time to observe the multitude of activities within the city, sighing deeply as he wondered when his hometown would achieve such prosperity. Shifting his focus to more pressing matters, he considered that it would be another 3 days before Binger arrived. Zhou Weiqing decided to sell the consolidating equipment scrolls in his possession. He knew that the skill-storing palace bought consolidating scrolls, and that the 10 sets in his possession would make him rich. Zhou Weiqing planned to use the money to rent a house outside the academy for himself and Binger to live in. Soon he arrived outside the skill-storing palace and was surprised by its impressive appearance, akin to that of an imperial palace. Unable to find words other than proud and grandiose to describe the place, he admitted that the skill-storing palace in his home country was nothing compared to the one he presently stood in. Zhou Weiqing speculated that there would be many Zong-level beasts with valuable skills he could acquire. As Zhou Weiqing contemplated the skill-storing palace, he recalled his future mother-in-law Tang Xian's advice to acquire more control skills. However, his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a frustrated man who walked past him, complaining about his visit to the skill-storing palace. The stranger had heard about the capture of a king-level beast with the space attribute, and wanted to attempt storing its skill. These words caused Zhou Weiqing's eyes to widen in shock. However, in an instant, his face quickly displayed a mix of greed, excitement, and mischief. Realizing he had stumbled upon an incredible opportunity, Zhou Weiqing lost himself in thoughts of excitement, his body trembling with anticipation. He chuckled in a maniacal way, causing other customers to feel awkward around him. After a while, Zhou Weiqing approached an attendant, reporting that he had received word about a king-level beast with the space attribute and wanted to store its skill. He inquired about the cost. The attendant, looking at Zhou Weiqing with skepticism, considered the boy just another fool with his head in the clouds, desperately trying to become the 7th victim of the day. Putting aside his lament, the attendant told Zhou Weiqing that it would cost 100,000 gold coins for a single attempt, 10 times the usual rate. Shocked by the exorbitant price, Zhou Weiqing questioned why it was so expensive. In response, the attendant argued that the skill-storing palace possessed a king-level heavenly beast with the space attribute, the only one of its kind in their facilities. He urged Zhou Weiqing to pay up or stop wasting time. In response to the attendant's demand for payment, Zhou Weiqing admitted that he did not have the money at the moment. However, he took out a stack of consolidating equipment scrolls, asking whether they would suffice since he was planning to sell them anyway. The attendant, shocked, asked if the boy was a scroll master, to which Zhou Weiqing affirmed. Upon inspection, the attendant appraised the value of the scrolls as the low-leveled kind, with each of the 2 sets in Zhou Weiqing's possession being worth 50,000 gold coins. Zhou Weiqing corrected the man by revealing that he possessed 10 sets and expressing his desire to sell them all. This left the attendant flustered. He then said he'd have to report to the seniors of the skill-storing palace first. In the meantime, Zhou Weiqing should proceed and attempt to store the skills. His money would be ready when he came out. Skeptically, Zhou Weiqing asked whether the attendant was pulling his leg. The attendant refuted this, explaining that he wouldn't dare do such a thing because he was an officer of the skill-storing palace. A while later, Zhou Weiqing arrived at the entrance to the enclosures of the heavenly beasts. His body tensed up immediately when he felt the suffocatingly intense pressure emanating from the enclosure still at its entrance. The king-level heavenly beast released the pressure. Ahead of him was a room, and the palpable aura emanating from it revealed that it belonged to the heavenly beast. Zhou Weiqing soon arrived before a signboard that indicated that the beast was known as the Silver Emperor Celestial Falcon. It was a heavenly beast with dual attributes of wind and space. It was considered the Lord of the Heavens because of its destructive power. Moreover, it had a habit of feeding on the brains of other animals and humans, earning it the ominous nickname Bird of Destruction due to its exceedingly violent and aggressive temperament. The information that caught Zhou Weiqing's attention the most was the dual attribute nature of the beast, which he considered a great steal. Fatty Cat peeked through Zhou Weiqing's garments and looked ahead with eager anticipation. As Zhou Weiqing entered the beast's enclosure, he pondered the moniker Lord of the Heavens and expected the beast to be huge. However, to his surprise, the moment he stepped into the enclosure, he saw a tiny bird perched on a tree branch. The boy stared at it awkwardly and wondered whether the bird before him was indeed a king-level heavenly beast bearing intimidating titles like the Lord of the Sky and Bird of Destruction. Despite the titles, the little creature did not look intimidating at all, but rather quite cute. Zhou Weiqing perceived no inherent power from the bird, finding it rather ordinary. Inside the enclosure, a signboard detailed the bird's skills: Silver Emperor's Spatial Rend, Phantom Clone, Wing Slash, and the Lightning Pierce. The abundance of wind attribute skills excited him, hoping to acquire at least 2, considering the limited space for storage. With that intent, he released his elemental jewels, extending his hand towards the bird. However, what transpired next took him by surprise. A slight, brilliant radiance emanated from the bird's eyes, enveloping its body in a dense aura. Zhou Weiqing immediately sensed that something was amiss. His heavenly energy had been completely blocked by an invisible barrier, a phenomenon entirely new to him. Suddenly, Fatty Cat emerged from Zhou Weiqing's clothes, emitting a tiny roar and appearing as a furious kitten. The Celestial Falcon responded in panic, experiencing a sense of dread. On the other hand, Fatty Cat looked incredibly angry as she leaped from her hiding spot into the tree branch. She approached the Celestial Falcon, delivering a hard smack on its head, leaving a visible bump. Meanwhile, Zhou Weiqing wore a puzzled expression, observing the absurd scene unfolding before him. With impatient growls, Fatty Cat glared at the bird, waving her left paw toward Zhou Weiqing. Moments later, the Celestial Falcon gazed at the boy before releasing a wave of aura containing numerous symbols. The bird's aura enveloped Zhou Weiqing, and there was an immediate resonance in his forehead. Simultaneously, his second elemental jewel glowed brilliantly, and the boy realized the bird had automatically imprinted its skills into his jewels. As a result, he had just obtained 2 skills in one stroke. He had never realized that skill storing could be so effortless, nor that heavenly beasts could take the initiative in such a manner. Still bewildered, Zhou Weiqing expressed gratitude to the 2 beasts. As he left the beast enclosure, he couldn't help but commend Fatty Cat's resourcefulness, marveling at her ability to command even king-level beasts. Feigning disappointment at his supposed failure in skill storing had become a routine for Zhou Weiqing, a strategy to avoid unnecessary attention. The attendant of the skill-storing palace attempted to reassure the boy, emphasizing that no one before him, including the staff at the palace, had ever achieved success. Zhou Weiqing responded with appreciation for the opportunity to attempt the process. Upon receiving a card containing 450,000 gold coins, payment from the scrolls he had sold, Zhou Weiqing was pleased. The attendant explained that he received a 50% discount because he had sold the scrolls in bulk. Zhou Weiqing welcomed the card, finding it more convenient to carry than a pile of coins. The attendant reminded him to return if he had more scrolls to sell in the future, assuring him of a satisfactory price. In the next moment, a pair of feminine legs entered the scene, and a harsh voice ordered Zhou Weiqing to move out of the way. Turning towards the source of the voice, he saw Princess Di Fuya walking arm in arm with a tall man sporting a cold expression. The princess repeated her order, and Zhou Weiqing immediately recognized her, recalling that she too intended to enroll in the same military academy. Despite not having seen her for many years, he was not surprised to find that the princess still flaunted a disdainful attitude. In response to her reprimand, Zhou Weiqing sarcastically addressed her as his fiancée, and remarked that it had been a long time. Playfully scolding her for being with another man despite their intact marriage contract, he left the princess shocked as she recognized him, dancing to the tune of his unexpected arrival. At the mere mention of the word fiancé, the man swiftly withdrew his arm from the princess. Desperation clouded her attempts to explain. Zhou Wei-king was nothing more than a preordained choice made by her father. Unmoved, the red-haired man asserted his desire to have no association with women entangled in other relationships. With a tone signaling finality, he suggested to the princess that they should put an end to their charade. Zhou Wei-king, observing the man's reaction, wore a mischievous expression, relishing the trouble he had caused the arrogant princess. The man, later approaching Zhou Wei-king with a haughty look, assured him that he had not yet touched the princess. Zhou Wei-king, perturbed by the man's arrogant demeanor, felt a sense of annoyance as if the man believed he was doing him a favor. In response, the boy inquired about the man's reference to him as little brother. Suddenly, the man released an overwhelming killing intent and momentarily startled Zhou Wei-king, who likened the intensity to that of his father. Undeterred, Zhou Wei-king refused to yield, repeating his earlier words and displaying an indomitable fighting spirit. The man swung his fist at Zhou Wei-king, aiming for a vicious sneak attack. However, the experienced fighter remained composed, his narrowed eyes signaling focused readiness. As the man's fist closed in, Zhou Wei-king countered with his own, momentarily stunning the red-haired assailant. The princess, witnessing the scene, trembled slightly in shock. Zhou Wei-king's opponent marveled at the boy's ability to withstand the attack, speculating about a possible physical duel with a strength affinity. Despite being pushed back a few meters, Zhou Wei-king realized the vast difference in strength between them. His opponent's cultivation clearly surpassed his own, despite the inherent strength granted by his physical jewels. Undeterred by the setback, Zhou Wei-king charged at his opponent once more, unfazed by the cultivation gap. The red-haired man, annoyed by the boy's audacity, took the initiative, swinging his fist in response. However, Zhou Wei-king had teleported away, skillfully avoiding the vicious blow. In that moment, the man recognized his opponent's possession of the spatial attribute. Responding by releasing a powerful wave of heavenly energy and releasing 5 sets of heavenly jewels, the man pushed Zhou Wei-king back. The boy was in disbelief, realizing his opponent possessed not only strength affinity, but also the light attribute in his elemental jewels. Despite this revelation, Zhou Wei-king charged at his opponent once again, displaying his indomitable spirit. The skill palace attendant intervened, urging the two fighters to consider their surroundings, promptly ending the confrontation. Reluctantly, the red-haired man withdrew his aura, turning away from Zhou Wei-king with a slight amusement. Introducing himself as Ming Yu, he expressed the belief that they would cross paths again. In response, Zhou Wei-king glared at his retreating figure before introducing himself. Ming Yu acknowledged the name and inwardly found Zhou Wei-king interesting, noting the lad's unique attitude. As he walked away, Princess Di Fuya called after him, but Ming Yu made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. Meanwhile, Zhou Wei-king stood frozen, overhearing the awkward exchange and recognizing the strength of the Fei Li Empire compared to his own Heavenly Bow Empire. He acknowledged that his possession of strength affinity had saved him from severe injury. Zhou Wei-king understood that to navigate the challenges ahead, he needed to bolster his strength. However, the harsh reality confronted him. He couldn't ensure the safety of Binger, let alone his own. 2 days later, the streets of the Fei Li Empire's capital bustled with unusual liveliness, marking the commencement of new student admissions. It was a transformative opportunity for civilians. 3 distinguished academies stood above the rest in the Fei Li Empire: the Imperial Palace Academy, the Imperial Heavenly Jewel Master Academy, and the Imperial Military Academy. These academies boasted the highest number of applicants, resulting in a highly competitive admission process. Zhou Wei-king and Binger had set their sights on enrollment at the Imperial Military Academy. The entrance exam, consisting of a written test and an interview, demanded top-notch performance in each category, scoring full marks in both guaranteed immediate acceptance. But the bar was set high. Nobles required 150 points to pass, while civilians needed 180. Zhou Wei-king pondered his status as a Viscount of the Heavenly Bow Empire, questioning whether he could be considered a noble. Interrupting his thoughts, a playful voice addressed him, inquiring about any particular attraction he might have noticed. A girl had arrived in the capital city, smiling sweetly as she asked if Zhou Wei-king had been thinking about her during their time apart. Zhou Wei-king was elated. He expressed how much he had missed her before rushing towards her and enveloping her in a passionate hug. Their display drew stares from onlookers, prompting Binger to request a bit more discretion. Reluctantly letting go, Zhou Wei-king held Binger close, declaring his determination to savor the moment after enduring the challenges of the past couple of months. Aware of the lingering gazes, Binger blushed as Zhou Weiqing gently placed his hand on her waist. They soon departed to register for the exam. A little later, a couple entered the enrollment area. Zhou Weiqing led Binger through the crowd with his arm around her shoulder, wearing a bright smile. He jovially requested those around them to make way for him and his girlfriend as they prepared to embark on the exam process. After completing the registration process, Zhou Weiqing remarked on the irony of registering as a commoner, despite his status as a viscount in his home country. He then turned to Binger, seeking her opinion on which exam they should tackle first. Binger, with a playful sparkle in her eyes, recommended the written exam and teasingly questioned if it wasn't Zhou Weiqing's favorite. Denying any affection for military literacy exams, Zhou Weiqing begrudgingly agreed to proceed with it. In the past, his father had not anticipated the boy inheriting his position, and thus, Zhou Weiqing had never received instruction in military knowledge. Despite his initial apprehension about the written exam, Zhou Weiqing was pleasantly surprised by its simplicity when he opened the paper. The essay question presented a challenging scenario. As the general of a small city with only 5,000 soldiers, facing a siege by 100,000 enemy troops, with reinforcements 3 days away, and prisoners of war being used as human shields, Zhou Weiqing was tasked with outlining his strategy to defend the city and its inhabitants. Drawing from his experiences in crafting consolidating equipment scrolls, Zhou Weiqing's penmanship transformed, becoming swift and elegant. Soon after the test began, he confidently stood up and submitted his paper. The examiner, skeptical of the boy's seriousness, hastily reviewed Zhou Weiqing's answers and was visibly shocked. Slamming down the paper, he protested that Zhou Weiqing's response was utterly absurd. Unfazed, Zhou Weiqing defended his stance, asserting that prioritizing the defense of the city was his primary objective. To achieve this, he proposed ordering the execution of all prisoners of war, recognizing them as both a liability and an inevitable loss. During the night, he planned to relinquish his position temporarily, leading a team of elite warriors to infiltrate the enemy camp, assassinate their commander-in-chief, destroy the camp, set fire to their provisions, and engage the enemy until the last man. The examiner found himself questioning the origin of Zhou Weiqing's answer. When he inquired about the boy's willingness to execute all the prisoners of war, he stressed that these prisoners were citizens under Zhou Weiqing's lordship. He raised concerns about the potential for rebellion and questioned if Zhou Weiqing would risk a suicidal mission to invade the enemy's camp, given the vast difference in strength. Maintaining a casual expression, Zhou Weiqing countered by asking why citizens would rebel and argued that as a soldier, the primary duty was to protect the city. He explained that in times of war, hesitation and kindness could lead to more deaths. While acknowledging the uncertainty of whether losing one city would impact the entire empire, he asserted that casualties were inevitable in war. Zhou Weiqing defended his plan to invade the enemy camp, emphasizing the potential rewards of success. Exasperated, the examiner labeled Zhou Weiqing a callous monster and declared that he would never be admitted to the academy, assigning his written exams a score of 0. Infuriated, Zhou Weiqing retorted, calling the examiner an old bastard. Before the situation escalated, Ming Yu, the figure from the skill-storing palace, entered the examination hall. Requesting patience from the old man, Ming Yu examined Zhou Weiqing's answer. The examiner, showing respect by addressing Ming Yu as Sir, indicated Ming Yu's elevated status. Ming Yu, after reading through the boy's answer, expressed shock and then confidently praised Zhou Weiqing. He announced that the boy deserved full marks for his response. Witnessing the scene with mouths agape, the old examiner and Binger exchanged puzzled looks with Zhou Weiqing. Inquiring politely, the examiner sought an explanation from Ming Yu regarding the high valuation given to Zhou Weiqing's seemingly absurd answer. Ming Yu addressed the old man as Master Aole and remarked on his expertise in military strategy, noting that he lacked battlefield experience. Ming Yu stressed the gravity of war, underlining that it always involved matters of life and death. As the one who crafted the question, he possessed the correct answer. While the old examiner remained baffled, Ming Yu assured him that he would provide an explanation later to avoid influencing other candidates' responses. Taking hold of Zhou Weiqing's answer sheet, Ming Yu, using a brush, graded it with full marks. Perplexed, Zhou Weiqing demanded to know Ming Yu's identity, while the man evaluated his exam. The old man scolded him for his lack of manners and proceeded to enlighten the boy about the prestigious Fei Li Empire's Imperial Military Academy, introducing Ming Yu, one of the most renowned figures in the empire. Skeptical about Ming Yu's fame, Zhou Weiqing voiced his doubts. The old man, though frustrated, confirmed Ming Yu's reputation. Suddenly, a stir erupted in the exam room. Excited examinees expressed their enthusiasm, revealing that some had applied to the academy solely because of Ming Yu. the Empire's esteemed god general. Binger, on the other hand, experienced a full-fledged fangirl moment, causing Zhou Weiqing to acknowledge Mingyu's undeniable charm. Understanding why Princess Di Fuya was enamored with Mingyu, Zhou Weiqing witnessed even Binger swooning over the man. Seizing the moment, Mingyu playfully winked at Binger and complimented her appearance, triggering an outburst from Zhou Weiqing. The boy leaped into the air, symbolically crushing an imaginary heart, and fiercely warned Mingyu not to seduce his girl. Despite Zhou Weiqing's heated reaction, Mingyu maintained his composure, expressing forgiveness for their earlier encounter, and commending the boy's answer. He noted a perceived similarity between the two of them before deciding to leave the exam room, avoiding further attention. In response, Zhou Weiqing, still upset, shouted a warning, declaring his lack of interest in men and expressing a wish never to encounter Mingyu again. Amused by the encounter, Mingyu chuckled as he walked away, finding Zhou Weiqing to be an honest yet foul-mouthed scoundrel. He looked forward to the exciting admissions process ahead. Upon completing their first exam, Binger took a moment to enlighten Zhou Weiqing about Sir Mingyu's remarkable qualifications. The man's fame extended beyond the borders of the Fei Li Empire, reaching across the entire mainland, where he held a prominent position as one of the military commanders. Mingyu was hailed as an idol among the younger generation, thanks to his unparalleled battle prowess. Zhou Weiqing, though awkwardly silent, listened attentively as his girlfriend delved into the celebrity's achievements from a young age, recounting how he had entered the military at the tender age of 14. The conclusion came with the revelation that Mingyu, at 30 years old, already bore the distinguished title of God General, earning him admiration even from rival empires. He had become a living legend, saving countless lives throughout his career. After Binger's insightful explanation, Zhou Weiqing declared his indifference to the man's past, emphasizing that what truly mattered was whether Mingyu was his girlfriend's idol. In response, Binger chuckled and playfully asked whether he was feeling jealous. She swiftly reassured him that while she respected Mingyu's military achievements, he was not her idol. She casually mentioned the rumors about Mingyu's questionable character. Curious, Zhou Weiqing inquired about the perceived flaw in Mingyu's character, prompting Binger to bluntly state that the man had a reputation for being a lustful pervert. The boy, undeterred, asked whether that was necessarily a bad thing. Binger teasingly questioned whether he had a guilty conscience, expressing confidence that he would surpass Mingyu. Zhou Weiqing responded with smug assurance, asserting that he had no intention of competing with the arrogant gentleman because he was determined to forge his path. Binger appeared pleased with his response as they continued their search for the venue of the next test. Arriving at a battle arena surrounded by a large audience, Zhou Weiqing recognized that their second test was practical. Observing the ongoing fight, he noted the imposing stature of a large man in the ring, who later identified himself as Ma Kun. The audience was impressed and intimidated as Ma Kun asserted his dominance, claiming full marks due to his opponent's inability to leave a scratch on him. The examiner, comparatively smaller in stature, demanded to inspect Ma Kun's heavenly jewels. Ma Kun, complying with the request, showcased his jewels, a heavenly jewel master possessing yellow emeralds and gold diamonds. The examiner recognized the defensive nature of Ma Kun's jewels, explaining the reason behind his formidable toughness. The examiner's countenance shifted from neutrality to an awkward one, prompting him to inquire why Ma Kun hadn't presented his jewels before enrolling for the exam. It was then revealed that jewel masters were exempt from the entrance exam, leaving Zhou Weiqing and his companion dumbfounded at the realization that they had wasted an entire morning. Without delay, they disclosed their status as jewel masters to the examiner, who commended the exceptional quality of that year's applicants. He revealed that 4 jewel masters had already secured acceptance into the military academy. Subsequently, he provided them with student IDs, instructing the trio to report back to the academy in 3 days for the commencement of the new semester. As they left the academy grounds, Binger acknowledged Zhou Weiqing's progress in cultivation, noting his possession of a 3rd set of jewels. Despite Zhou Weiqing sharing the difficulties he had encountered in the past 5 months, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the imposing figure of Ma Kun. The man, with a brash introduction and compliments directed at Binger, attempted to engage her in conversation. His flattering words and claim of her being the most beautiful woman he had ever seen irked Zhou Weiqing, whose expression soured at the perceived insincerity of the large man. Taking a stand, the boy stepped between Binger and the towering Ma Kun, addressing the latter as a big loaf and warning him to mind his own business. Expressing his disdain for Ma Kun's pretense, Zhou Weiqing threatened physical confrontation if the large man persisted. In response, Ma Kun remained calm and patient, referring to Zhou Weiqing as little brother, and asserting that the latter couldn't beat him. Despite Zhou Weiking's darkened expression and sneer, he declared his intention to accept the challenge. Ma Kun suggested a bet, proposing a test of their abilities. Ma Kun proposed a wager, suggesting a confrontation between him and Zhou Weiking. The terms were clear. If Zhou Weiking emerged victorious, Ma Kun would depart. However, if he failed, he had to surrender the pretty girl to Ma Kun. Yinger anxiously observed the unfolding tension between the two men. Prepared for the impending clash, Zhou Weiking dismissed everything Ma Kun had said as irrelevant. With an air of confidence, he remarked that defeat was a rare occurrence for him, and swiftly accepted the bet, questioning Ma Kun's readiness for the challenge. Ma Kun's body was promptly enveloped in heavenly energy, and he scoffed at Zhou Weiking, urging him to make a move. In response, Zhou Weiking, acknowledging the camaraderie suggested by Ma Kun's use of brother, asserted that he wouldn't resort to using his jewels to bully the large man. Seizing the moment, Zhou Weiking's right leg radiated a brilliant glow at the major acupoint, and his right leg was instantly surrounded by a swirling mass of dark aura. Before Ma Kun could react, Zhou Weiking closed the distance and unleashed a devastating kick, striking his opponent's torso. The force of the impact knocked the wind out of Ma Kun, who found himself in disbelief and denial as his entire body soared into the sky. As the large man sailed away, Zhou Weiking, with a hint of satisfaction, addressed his departing opponent, reminding him of the consequences of coveting what rightfully belonged to him. The commencement of new student induction loomed just 3 days away, affording Zhou Weiking the opportunity to explore Fei Li City with Binger. He also made 2 visits to the skill-storing palace, encountering king-level beasts and storing their remaining skills. Those 3 days proved to be a delightful and leisurely reunion, marked by the sharing of numerous stories. As the day arrived, Zhou Weiking and Binger found themselves outside the men's dormitory. According to Binger, it epitomized simplicity and civility. Eager to help, she and her boyfriend arrived early, ready to clean up and make Zhou Weiking's bed. Inside the dorm, they discovered 4 bunk beds, but Zhou Weiking noticed the absence of other arrivals. The room presented a sorry sight, cobwebs and fungus adorning various corners, leaving Zhou Weiking visibly disgusted by its unkempt state. He remarked that the place truly lived up to its annual rent of 20 gold coins. On the contrary, Binger remained cheerful and unfazed, assuring Zhou Weiking that there was no need to worry, as she would assist in the cleanup. During their efforts, Zhou Weiking suggested that money was no longer an issue, proposing the idea of renting a house in the city. Binger, however, found the suggestion suspicious and inquired if he harbored any peculiar intentions. They continued their work, laughing and chatting. Upon completing their task, voices reached Zhou Weiking from the doorway. A group of new students accompanied a large man, identified as Ma Kun, who appeared smug, having acquired new followers. However, those who met Zhou Weiking's disdainful gaze quickly broke into a cold sweat. As Ma Kun's minions attempted to introduce him, he took the lead, seizing the mop from Zhou Weiking's hands. Expressing nervous delight at sharing a dorm with Zhou Weiking, whom he referred to as his boss, Ma Kun's overt bootlicking left his followers in an awkward position. Amid discussions about sleeping arrangements, Binger interjected, recognizing Ma Kun from the incident 3 days prior. In response, Ma Kun blushed, referring to Binger as a pretty sister, and affirming that he was indeed all right after recovering from his injuries. Ma Kun's regret settled in like a bitter aftertaste mere moments after he uttered those ill-fated words. A shiver raced down his spine as Zhou Weiking, undeterred, inquired whether the large man had already forgotten the lesson from the previous day. With an intimidating air, Zhou Weiking directed his gaze towards Ma Kun's minions, who couldn't help but ogle his girlfriend, leaving him to ponder whether she was perceived as a commoner among them. Losing patience, Zhou Weiking decisively seized Binger's hand and led her out of the dorm, declaring that they would leave the rest of the cleaning to those individuals. Once the couple had departed, one of the minions sought Ma Kun's guidance on the identity of the captivating girl, questioning if she was indeed Zhou Weiking's girlfriend. In response, Ma Kun cautioned the inquisitive man to think twice before making advances toward Binger, emphasizing the potential repercussions. Outside, Binger queried their destination and wondered if Zhou Weiking's ire was a result of Ma Kun and his minions. Voicing his slight annoyance, Zhou Weiking expressed his discomfort with those individuals openly gawking at Binger, desiring to keep them at a distance. Proposing they head to Binger's dorm to assist with the cleanup, Zhou Weiking faced a playful inquiry from Binger, questioning whether he was only interested in cleaning or if he sought other beauties. In response, Zhou Weiking innocently asserted his pure-hearted intentions, requesting her trust. Unconvinced, Binger departed for her dorm, leaving Zhou Weiking to drop the act. He sighed, acknowledging the increasing difficulty in fooling her as she grasped his thought processes. Undeterred by the commoner's dormitory, He decided to venture to the nobles' dormitories for a better view, rating the female nobles he encountered yet finding them consistently disappointing compared to Binger's beauty. Suddenly, Mingyu joined him, casually remarking on the pleasing view and expressing surprise at having never considered the spot before. Moments later, he sighed, noting the mediocrity without even glancing at Zhou Weiqing, declaring that Zhou Weiking's girl was the most beautiful in the entire academy. Mingyu's sudden appearance jolted Zhou Weiqing, who furrowed his brow in caution as Mingyu approached noiselessly. Deciding to engage in conversation, Mingyu, recognizing a fellow admirer of beauty, suggested they had nothing in common, brushing off the attempt to shift the topic. The mention of Zhou Weiking's answer in the written exam intrigued Mingyu, catching the boy off guard and prompting him to inquire about the reason. Mingyu elaborated that the question wasn't merely a creation, but recounted a genuine battle he had experienced during an inspection in a border city a few months prior. The information had leaked, and upon his arrival, the Wanshou Empire had deployed 100,000 troops to invade the city, using 100,000 civilians as human shields. Responding to Zhou Weiking's inquiry about how he handled the situation, Mingyu explained that he had executed nearly the exact strategy Zhou Weiqing had written in the exam. He emphasized that being soft-hearted that day would have resulted in even more civilian casualties. Mingyu also criticized the military academy teachers, noting their lack of understanding regarding the harsh reality of the Wanshou Empire's cruelty. Mingyu recounted his decision to order his troops to set traps in the city and impulsively lead 1,000 soldiers to attack the enemy's camp at night. He admitted it was a gamble, driven by the necessity to maintain troop morale. Mingyu's expression darkened as he revealed that out of the 1,000 troops, only 47 returned from that perilous raid. Mingyu unfolded the tale of a grueling battle, detailing the enemy's relentless retaliation and the staggering losses, millions of civilian lives succumbing as the enemy breached their primary defenses. Zhou Weiqing absorbed every word as Mingyu recounted the 2-day, 2-night battle that left the enemy reeling. A significant blow only repelled with the arrival of reinforcements. A mere 5,000 soldiers defended the city against an overwhelming force, resulting in over 70,000 enemy casualties. Gazing at Zhou Weiqing, Mingyu described the victory as nothing short of a miracle and sought the boy's perspective. Zhou Weiqing quickly concurred, expressing awe at how Mingyu not only survived but emerged victorious. Mingyu, sighing contentedly, acknowledged that despite the triumph, the surviving soldiers viewed him not as a hero, but as a cold-blooded killer. The narrative continued with Mingyu's expulsion from the military and subsequent repentance as a teacher at the academy. His somber tone darkened as he emphasized the brutal and ruthless nature of war, asserting that there was no room for kindness or forgiveness on the battlefield. He highlighted the naivete of those who hadn't experienced the grim reality of bloodshed. Mingyu revealed his happiness upon reading Zhou Weiking's exam answer, speculating on the boy's military leadership talent. He expressed regret that Zhou Weiqing wasn't a citizen of the Fei Li Empire, as fighting alongside him would have been a pleasure. Zhou Weiqing, acknowledging the alliance between their empires, humbly stated he wasn't yet qualified to stand beside Mingyu on the battlefield, but aspired to be one day. Mingyu smiled, appreciating the camaraderie in Zhou Weiking's words. The conversation, however, was abruptly interrupted as Zhou Weiqing noticed a figure on the ground, diverting their attention. With nonchalant ease, Zhou Weiqing beckoned for Mingyu's attention, claiming that the view had remarkably improved with the arrival of a pretty redhead. He pointed out the elegance of her dark dress and arm braces, excited that Mingyu was casting a glance in their direction. However, the tranquil moment took an abrupt turn when Mingyu lost his temper. Questioning the cause of Mingyu's agitation, Zhou Weiqing was met with an angry revelation. The girl was Mingyu's sister. Mingyu sternly demanded that Zhou Weiqing cease his gaze. Unfazed, Zhou Weiqing shamelessly beamed with excitement, suggesting they become brothers and requesting an introduction to Mingyu's sister. This ignited Mingyu's anger further. He was irate that Zhou Weiqing, despite having a girlfriend, still coveted his sister. Determined to teach the boy a lesson, Mingyu considered it the first one of the semester. Zhou Weiqing, attempting to defuse the situation, claimed he was merely appreciating her beauty and reminded Mingyu of the school's no-fighting policy. Realizing it was time to depart, Zhou Weiqing cheekily pressed for Mingyu's sister's name, only to be harshly rebuffed. Amidst Mingyu's fuming insults, his sister arrived, inquiring about the commotion and playfully asking about the boy who had been there a moment ago. Mingyu identified Zhou Weiqing as an interesting but troublesome kid. Mingyu cautioned his sister about Zhou Weiqing, using her pet name, Hua Hua, which she found annoying. Mingyu insisted it was a great name, and that her reputation would prevent anyone from associating her with a pet. Despite his warnings, the sister's curiosity was piqued, wondering what made Zhou Weiqing catch her brother's attention. As Zhou Weiqing returned to his sparkling dormitory, Ma Kun greeted him respectfully, inquiring if the room met his satisfaction. Zhou Weiqing dismissed the title of boss, given by Ma Kun, emphasizing that he wasn't forming a mafia. Ma Kun defended the title, asserting that Zhou Weiqing's strength naturally warranted it. Just then, 4 figures appeared at the doorway, crudely announcing the time for new students to pay the protection fee. Zhou Weiqing shifted his gaze in their direction, noting the presence of 4 robust figures with clean-shaven heads. As their scowls met his own, a dark aura enveloped Zhou Weiqing. Sternly, he warned them to depart. The leader of the group retorted insolently, questioning Zhou Weiqing's audacity and demanding to know who he thought he was before pressing for 100 gold coins per person for the year. Joining the conversation, Ma Kun inquired about the consequences of non-payment, emphasizing that the boss, Zhou Weiqing, had already instructed them to leave. In defiance, the aggressors revealed their heavenly jewels, gearing up for a confrontation. Yet, Zhou Weiqing remained motionless and instructed Ma Kun to handle the situation, viewing it as an opportunity for the latter to prove his worth as a brother by clearing out the troublesome individuals. Ma Kun hesitated, fearing the possibility of a physical altercation. Expressing disappointment, Zhou Weiqing reminded him of the missed chance to earn favor. Zhou Weiqing then turned to the aggressors with a sinister look and inquired if they were struggling to locate the exit before offering to assist them. The gang's leader responded with fury, prompting Zhou Weiqing to charge at him, fist at the ready and a cold, determined glint in his eyes. Zhou Weiqing's forceful strike sent his adversaries flying, their agonized screams filling the air. Despite the chaos, Zhou Weiqing remained composed, rebuking them for audaciously demanding a protection fee considering their limited skills. One of the newly recruited minions, who had entered the room, marveled at Zhou Weiqing's strength, realizing why Ma Kun referred to him as boss. The revelation of Zhou Weiqing's prowess as a formidable jewel master became apparent. As the defeated aggressors writhed in pain on the ground, Zhou Weiqing addressed the recruits with a commanding voice. He urged everyone to evacuate their rooms and invited those who had their gold stolen by the gang to come forward and reclaim it. Despite the disbelief and hesitation among the assembled recruits, dozens gathered in the courtyard. The leader of the gang, struggling to rise, swore vengeance on Zhou Weiqing, insisting he not attempt to escape. Zhou Weiqing scoffed at the notion, expressing his refusal to let the gang off lightly. Turning to the crowd, he implored them to observe the beaten-up seniors and encouraged them to step forward and retrieve their money. Zhou Weiqing was uncertain if they were willing to pay. Addressing the gang leader as Baldy, Zhou Weiqing proclaimed the end of their exploitation. Observing the tense atmosphere among the recruits, a voice in the crowd broke the silence, asserting that Zhou Weiqing had a loud mouth. Parting the crowd, a formidable man, referred to as Brother Lang by the gang, stepped forward. Zhou Weiqing eyed the bald man named Zhang Lang with a scar on his face, cautioning him against interference. Zhang Lang, unimpressed, sarcastically acknowledged the situation, likening Zhou Weiqing to a weed desperate for a beating. Proposing a bet, Zhang Lang challenged Zhou Weiqing. If the latter won, he could dictate the rules, but if he lost, he would have to comply with Zhang Lang's terms. In response, Zhou Weiqing glared, declaring his focus on studying rather than gambling. However, Zhang Lang remained adamant, provoking Zhou Weiqing to unleash his heavenly energy, charging at his adversary with a determined intent. He vowed to deliver a beating so severe that the man's mother wouldn't recognize him. Zhang Lang, taken aback by the sudden assault, countered Zhou Weiqing's potent kick with one of his own. In that moment, he sensed something amiss as he was forcefully propelled backward, managing to regain his footing. Beads of cold sweat trickled down Zhang Lang's face, contemplating the intensity of the strike. Onlookers were astonished that Zhang Lang had been pushed back, sparking curiosity about Zhou Weiqing's identity as he displayed a strength uncommon for a newcomer. Meanwhile, Zhou Weiqing calmly assessed the situation, recognizing his opponent's likely possession of the coordination affinity of a heavenly jewel master. Sensing Zhang Lang releasing his jewels and enveloping himself in brilliant heavenly energy, Zhou Weiqing prepared for the impending attack. Acknowledging the overwhelming strength of his opponent, Zhang Lang understood that a direct confrontation was not an option. He needed to leverage his stored skills, prompting him to release his elemental jewels and conjure several giant fireballs through a technique known as the bursting fireball. Zhou Weiqing analyzed Zhang Lang's elemental jewel, a ruby with the fire attribute, and recognized the potency of the bursting fireball technique, surpassing even that of Princess Di Fuya. With the audience in shock at Zhang Lang's skill, many believed the rookie was on the brink of defeat. However, Zhou Weiqing stood firm as the fireballs hurtled toward him. With unwavering concentration, he condensed his heavenly energy into 2 fingers, unleashing his newly stored skill, the Spatial Rend. Zhou Weiking's formidable display of power instilled terror in everyone nearby, mainly due to the potent suction force emanating from the spatial rift. The fireballs, closing in on Zhou Weiking, found themselves ensnared by the intense pull, swiftly swallowed by the rift in space. Zhang Lang stood in shock, witnessing how effortlessly his fireballs were devoured, perplexed by Zhou Weiking's mysterious technique. Recalling that Spatial Rend was a unique ability of the Silver Emperor Falcon, a king-level beast, Zhou Weiking was confident in its ability to consume anything. However, with his current 3-jewel cultivation, he could only manifest a 3-foot-long rift in space lasting 3 seconds. Leveraging his sharpened battle instincts, Zhou Weiking closed the distance while the Spatial Rend was active, catching his opponent off guard for a direct assault. Contemplating whether Zhang Lang would choose to dodge, Zhou Weiking, delivering his trademark kick, sent Zhang Lang airborne, leaving his minions in disbelief. Surprisingly, Zhou Weiking wasn't finished with his onslaught. Propelling himself into the air with tremendous force, he pursued his airborne adversary, rapidly closing the gap. Seeing Zhou Weiking's figure approaching, Zhang Lang, realizing he was airborne and vulnerable, opted to avoid another kick that could spell his ruin. Determined to repel Zhou Weiking, he unleashed a torrent of flames fueled by his heavenly energy, preparing to intercept the imminent assault. However, Zhou Weiking vanished from sight, leaving Zhang Lang bewildered. Before he could comprehend the situation, Zhou Weiking reappeared behind him, wielding his overlord bow and delivering a powerful strike. Zhang Lang's body crashed onto the ground, scattering debris around, prompting his minions to rush and try to assist him back to his feet hastily. Zhou Weiking gracefully descended before them, his eyes fixed on the battered form of his opponent, nestled within a small crater. Seizing the moment, he condescended to his fallen adversary, inquiring about his well-being and taunting him to rise, noting that he was barely warmed up. Zhang Lang's minions rushed forward, eager to shield their leader from further harm. However, Zhou Weiking intercepted them, questioning if they were eager to join the fray and face his wrath as well. A determined bald minion retorted, adamantly declaring that he would no longer allow Zhou Weiking to harm Brother Lang. Unperturbed, Zhou Weiking turned his attention to the recruits, questioning whether their gang had not safeguarded them by collecting protection money. Observing the unfolding drama, the leader of the small gang elucidated that without Brother Lang, commoner recruits would have been subjected to enslavement by the nobles. Charging a protection fee was a means to empower Zhang Lang, ensuring everyone's safety. Failure to do so would have led to the commoner students being bullied to death by the arrogant nobles. Expressing his astonishment, Zhou Weiking listened as the kimono recruits spoke up one by one, siding with Zhang Lang. In an instant, they all rallied behind their protector, urging Zhou Weiking to cease causing trouble. They affirmed that the protection fee was voluntary, and implored the rookie to respect their ways. Zhou Weiking expressed dissatisfaction, questioning why Zhang Lang couldn't raise money on his own, given his status as a heavenly jewel master. The gang leader countered, emphasizing the complexity of making money, citing the exorbitant costs of skill storing and consolidating equipment scrolls that were beyond the means of commoners. He revealed that nobles sought to dominate and exploit the commoners, making them their lackeys. Despite enduring humiliation, they refused to surrender their dignity. Working part-time was their only recourse to prevent nobles from trampling on them. Zhou Weiking deduced that the commoners were determined not to be enslaved by the nobles or the skill-storing palace, and the gang leader affirmed his conclusion. When Zhou Weiking questioned the necessity of collecting a protection fee, the gang leader explained that Zhang Lang aimed to toughen the new students. He assured Zhou Weiking that he would understand when the semester began. As the crowd dispersed, Ma Kun, standing behind Zhou Weiking, remarked that his boss seemed to have acquired a few enemies. The boy angrily dismissed Ma Kun, pondering the consequences of the mess he had just stirred. Zhou Weiking, adopting a villainous persona, pointed at the gang leader, warning against further interference, threatening to beat them up black and blue. Unfazed, he stormed off, leaving the onlookers in awkward silence. Among the spectators, one unexpected observer had keenly watched the entire incident: Mingyu's sister, Manhua. Analyzing Zhou Weiking's abilities as a 3-jeweled heavenly jewel master with a pure strength affinity, possessing a consolidated weapon in the form of a bow, she concluded that the boy was undeniably intriguing, understanding why her brother spoke highly of him. As Zhou Weiking strolled through the academy, he witnessed firsthand the turmoil he had incited. News of a newcomer defeating their protector had ignited the commoner students, fueling their desire for revenge. Amidst the rising tension, Zhou Weiking experienced an unsettling chill down his spine, akin to the sensation of having ingested something repugnant. Just as the atmosphere became charged, Binger arrived, concerned about the news of his recent altercation. Zhou Weiqing explained the situation, describing the demand for protection money and the ensuing chaos at the school dormitory. Shifting the focus, he adopted a serious tone, expressing concern about the impact on their cultivation if they continued staying in the dorms for too long. He proposed the idea of renting a place together in the city. Binger eyed him suspiciously, raising an eyebrow and questioning his intentions. Zhou Weiqing swiftly clarified that he had no ulterior motives, mentioning the 2 ice snow bears he had adopted. He emphasized the harmful effects of being confined in the storage ring for too long, asserting that cultivation outside the academy, without interruptions, would be beneficial. His sincerity appeared to sway Binger, and she seemed convinced. Agreeing with Zhou Weiqing's suggestion, Binger insisted on a crucial condition that they would sleep in separate rooms. Despite his protests, Binger asserted that it was the only way to keep him in check. Zhou Weiqing reluctantly acquiesced, vowing to remain calm. She reminded him of the need for permission to leave the academy, but Zhou Weiqing dismissed the matter as trivial. Swiftly returning with the permission slips, Zhou Weiqing hummed melodiously, considering it a small price for the privilege of a handsome and wealthy man. Eager to find a house, he headed toward the large backyard to retrieve his luggage, bringing Binger along. The prospect of having their place excited him, and he felt like a dream come true. However, his thoughts were disrupted by a commotion near the new house. Someone had been negotiating with the landlord, seeking to secure the property. To Zhou Weiqing's surprise, the individual turned out to be Mingyu's sister, Manhua. She expressed her willingness to pay double the rent amount to the landlord. Zhou Weiqing recognized her instantly as his attention was drawn to the unfolding situation. He pondered why she desired to rent a place at that particular location rather than staying at home. The landlord attempted to dissuade Manhua to no avail. Fortunately, his relief was evident upon Zhou Weiqing's arrival. Facing Manhua, Zhou Weiqing informed her that he had already secured the place with Binger, having already paid the deposit. The girl unexpectedly drew closer and playfully asserted her status as a lonely woman with no other place to stay. She questioned whether Zhou Weiqing would simply send her away before urging him to show his chivalry by letting her have the house. This brief exchange irritated Binger, who promptly stepped in between her boyfriend and the unfamiliar woman. She demanded to know why the latter was behaving like a lost child, and clarified that Zhou Weiqing had not taken the house from someone but had signed a rental contract. Manhua remained silent as Binger directed Zhou Weiqing to carry the luggage inside their bedroom and pay the landlord for the present month. Zhou Weiqing agreed, being the ever-compliant yes-man before Binger. In response to Binger's request, Manhua released her killing intent, challenging Binger. She questioned what Binger would do if she refused to leave. Binger was unyielding and politely asked the stranger to depart before releasing her heavenly jewels with a stern expression. The opponent, refusing to leave, responded with a cheeky smile before analyzing Binger's abilities. She acknowledged the promising quality of the new admissions. Zhou Weiqing abruptly joined Binger. He stood beside his girlfriend, noting the strength of their opponent. The landlord, who had sensed the impending danger, panicked and sought to leave the area. He understood the disastrous consequences of a fight between 2 heavenly jewel masters. At that moment, Zhou Weiqing put down his luggage and stepped forward, requesting Binger to allow him to handle the situation and leave the fight to him. Despite Zhou Weiqing's determined gaze, Manhua seemed unfazed, because her initial plan had been to test Zhou Weiqing's power. After a brief standoff, Manhua charged at Zhou Weiqing. Noting his opponent's speed, the boy formulated a challenge to determine which was faster, her attack or his hands. With a lustful gleam in his eyes, Zhou Weiqing executed the dragon claw hand, targeting the melons right in front of him. This sudden change left Manhua utterly shocked. As Zhou Weiqing advanced toward his soon-to-be victim, she let out a shriek, labeling him a stinky scoundrel. Undeterred, Zhou Weiqing laughed menacingly, inviting his opponent to experience his master's unique technique. Binger observed in silent disappointment, while Mingyu's sister found the situation unbelievable. However, before Zhou Weiqing could reach her, Manhua leaped out of his way and countered with a kick before accusing him of shamelessness. Zhou Weiqing had anticipated the incoming attack and boldly absorbed it with his forehead. This unexpected response left Manhua shocked. She quickly retreated, wincing in pain, and marveling at the toughness of her opponent's head. Manhua felt as though her kneecaps would fall off when she realized that Zhou Weiqing's cultivation was not to be underestimated. The boy was unimpressed and dismissed his opponent, declaring that her 4-jewel cultivation turned out to be nothing more than that. He added that it was sad his opponent could not even leave a scratch on him, despite putting all her effort into her previous attack. Manhua trembled slightly as she shifted weight from her injured leg. Afterward, she finally revealed her elemental jewels. Zhou Weiqing immediately recognized them and was shocked when he realized the elemental jewels possessed the life attribute. At that moment, while Manhua activated one of the skills of her elemental jewels, Zhou Weiqing recalled that the life attribute was among the rarest of the 4 great attributes. Moreover, it granted the wielder incredible healing abilities. When Manhua declared that she had no other choice, Zhou Weiqing watched as her physical jewels glowed brightly. His eyes widened in shock when he realized what was about to happen. In an instant, his opponent had donned a set of battle armor, which significantly amplified her aura. The boy recognized that his opponent possessed a set of consolidating equipment armor, no doubt the creation of a grandmaster. After her transformation, Manhua asked whether her opponent was scared now that he had recognized her consolidating equipment. In silent contemplation, Zhou Weiqing realized that his opponent's armor far surpassed that of Senior Feng Yu. Currently, his opponent had 4 pieces: a weapon, a chest plate, right greaves, and a right gauntlet. He speculated that when the armor set was complete, she would possess 7 pieces. This was the first time he had seen so many pieces of top-quality armor. However, he understood that he could not afford to make any mistakes. His thoughts were interrupted when his opponent rushed toward him, resuming their fight. Zhou Weiqing noticed that her speed had multiplied several times over, making her movements appear more like a blur. He struggled to endure some of the attacks, while he acknowledged that the armor set created by a Grand Master enabled his opponent to push him back in an instant. Before long, Zhou Weiqing decided that he had to fight back. In an instant, he unleashed the spatial rend on Manhua. The latter recalled that her opponent had used the same skill against Zhang Lang. When she witnessed the immense suction force, Manhua realized she was being dragged into the rift in space. Zhou Weiqing had a look of satisfaction as he watched his opponent struggle against his technique, causing her to pause for a moment. However, that brief moment was all he needed, and he swiftly followed up with another attack. With a condescending tone, Zhou Weiqing asserted that the swiftness of his opponent was inconsequential, since she couldn't evade his impending attack. On the contrary, his opponent found herself rendered speechless, pondering the nature of Zhou Weiqing's latest skill, wondering whether it too belonged to the spatial attribute and why her opponent possessed so many control skills. Zhou Weiqing seized the opportunity to mock his opponent, implying that despite her possession of consolidating equipment armor, she had yet to witness a fraction of his capabilities. He unleashed the spatial shackles, an 8-star ranked skill, confident that, given his cultivation base, the skill should endure for about 5 to 6 seconds. As his opponent froze in place, panic visibly setting in, Zhou Weiqing decided it was time to take the fight seriously. He released his physical jewels, determined to exhibit his consolidation set. Manhua was in shock as she discerned the radiant light emanating from his opponent's physical jewels. The dark golden glow was an unmistakable sign of legendary consolidating equipment. The dark golden aura enveloped Zhou Weiqing, who mused that his opponent was quite knowledgeable enough to recognize the unique light he radiated. As the brilliant surge of golden light dissipated, it revealed a set of legendary dual god-strength hammers in Zhou Weiqing's hands. His opponent was visibly shocked at the sight of Zhou Weiqing's legendary weapons and questioned him about the number he possessed. With a smirk, Zhou Weiqing casually remarked that his opponent seemed well-versed in consolidating equipment and assured her that he only had a single pair of weapons. Realizing the escalating danger, Manhua resorted to her trump card. Her elemental jewel glowed, and in her hand appeared a dark flower petal. While life-attributed elemental jewels couldn't store offensive skills, they were endowed with personal plants that could protect their owners in battle. Minghua's personal plant, known as the Flower of Hades, manifested several petals that scattered into the surroundings. Confident that this skill was useless against him, Zhou Weiqing watched as Manhua sent the flowers flowing toward him. With a powerful wave of heavenly energy, he grabbed his overbearing hammers and effortlessly blew the petals away. Manhua was taken aback, realizing that Zhou Weiqing's hammers could shatter the flowers of the underworld. However, Zhou Weiqing leaped into the air with deadly intent, and Manhua, recognizing the imminent danger, widened her eyes, knowing her defense would likely crumble. In a desperate move, she released another technique, the Shield of Life. But Zhou Weiqing's powerful blow delivered a devastating impact to her shield, and he yelled with determination for it to break, causing Manhua to experience true terror. To her surprise, she wasn't dead, and Zhou Weiqing, with a blank expression, questioned whether the cat got her tongue. Perplexed, and considering Zhou Weiqing a monster, Manhua realized that their earlier fight had seemed like nothing more than a warm-up to him. Blushing unexpectedly, she felt a sudden attraction to him, admiring his handsome and domineering presence as he swung his hammers. Zhou Weiqing, sensing the change in atmosphere, questioned why his opponent was blushing suddenly when he assumed that he had scared her. In response to Minghua's unexpected actions, Binger walked forward, expressing concern for her man's safety. He dismissed the worry, assuring it was just a minor scuffle he could handle. As he glared at Manhua, urging her to leave after her defeat, he was caught off guard by her sudden change in demeanor. Minghua's figure swayed, and she threw herself at Zhou Weiqing, acting cute and using the excuse of weakened legs. She questioned whether Zhou Weiqing had the heart to drive her away. In response, Binger protested, demanding that the skank keep her paws off her man. Manhua retorted, insinuating jealousy on Binger's part. Zhou Weiqing stepped forward, reminding Manhua of the bet they had made, that she would leave if she lost. However, Manhua denied ever making such a bet and threatened to run around the city, yelling that Zhou Weiqing was a molester if he dared send her away. Incensed, Zhou Weiqing called Manhua a parasite for resorting to blackmail. In an attempt to defuse the situation, Manhua suggested they were all adults and proposed a compromise. Since neither party intended to leave, she wouldn't insist on their departure either. She reasoned that the place was too large for just Zhou Weiqing and Binger, and she only needed to rent a single room. Minghua's persistent presence left Zhou Weiqing in a state of frustration, lamenting the missed opportunity to end her. He even found himself comparing her to her more reasonable brother. However, neither Zhou Weiqing nor Binger had the energy to continue arguing with her. Eventually, they decided to give up and allow her to stay. Despite Zhou Weiqing's strong desire to crush Manhua with his hammers, her status prevented him from taking any drastic action. Killing her would undoubtedly lead to significant trouble. Once the situation settled, Zhou Weiqing and Binger proceeded to pay the landlord and spent the afternoon thoroughly cleaning their new house. Their new lodger, Manhua, remained in her room throughout the day, clearly affected by the earlier fight with Zhou Weiqing. Despite her condition, Zhou Weiqing showed little interest in her well-being. The house had 3 rooms in total, one for each occupant. Da Huang and Er Huang, the 2 ice bears, were released from the storage space, and Binger observed that they seemed to have grown again. Zhou Weiqing gave the 2 minions the freedom to do as they pleased in the yard, with the only exception being a directive to use the west gate for any necessary bathroom breaks. Even Fatty Cat, who had previously followed Zhou Weiqing everywhere, seemed to have changed her behavior. She spent her days sleeping on a chair, seemingly uninterested in her surroundings. As Zhou Weiqing prepared to leave for the academy on his first day of classes, he approached Fatty Cat, asking if she would accompany him. However, Fatty Cat remained unresponsive, continuing her nap. Zhou Weiqing, concerned that she might be sick, pondered taking her to a vet, though he doubted there was one in Feituo City. Fatty Cat, awakened by the movement, leaped from Zhou Weiqing's hands to a table. She dipped her paw into a nearby water bowl and then inscribed a message with her claws. The message revealed that she found Zhou Weiqing annoying and chose to cultivate instead of accompanying him. Zhou Weiqing could only express his shock at her unexpected response. The revelation that Fatty Cat possessed the ability to write caught Zhou Weiqing completely off guard. His mind immediately veered toward the notion of showcasing this newfound talent at a talent show, envisioning a future where they would amass wealth before Fatty Cat could even finish writing a letter. However, Fatty Cat, in response, shot him a disdainful glare and promptly inscribed another message, bluntly branding Zhou Weiqing as an idiot. Zhou Weiqing found himself taken aback, realizing that his own pet had just scolded him. Despite the awkward exchange, Fatty Cat appeared unharmed, leaving Zhou Weiqing with the realization that perhaps his eccentric pet had more surprises up its furry sleeve. Deciding to cast aside any concerns, the boy left for the academy, his mind buzzing with the unexpected encounter. Upon reaching the academy with Binger, they decided to attend the opening ceremony held at the sports field. The couple strolled hand in hand, sharing a content moment as they approached the lively event. The sports field, as predicted, became a stage where random admirers were captivated by Binger's presence. Zhou Weiqing, sporting a smug expression, relished the envy from those onlookers who could only watch with bitter faces. The couple settled into their designated assembly grounds, only to be greeted by familiar faces, including Ma Kun and his minions. The minions cheerfully addressed Zhou Weiqing as their boss, a title that Zhou Weiqing tried in vain to discourage. However, one particularly loyal minion insisted that Zhou Weiqing would always be their leader, earning his respect for standing up for the commoner students. Amused by the camaraderie, Zhou Weiqing accepted the camaraderie and labeled the minion a fellow brother. Their banter continued until Zhang Lang, a figure from Zhou Weiqing's recent confrontation, appeared behind him, addressing him directly. Zhang Lang revealed that there were no classes that day and requested Zhou Weiqing to stay behind for the opening ceremony, citing a need for a discussion. Without hesitation, Zhou Weiqing agreed, after which Zhang Lang and his gang departed from the assembly grounds. The new minion seized the opportunity to compliment Zhou Weiqing for his smooth interaction with Zhang Lang, emphasizing the unexpected politeness displayed by Zhang Lang. However, the flattery was abruptly interrupted when a man proudly called out to Zhou Weiqing, eyeing Binger with unmistakable interest. Zhou Weiqing immediately took a protective stance and stepped into the man's line of sight. When he questioned where the man was looking, the latter conveyed a message from his boss, praising Zhou Weiqing for the honor of becoming his little brother. Afterward, the man walked past Zhou Weiqing and attempted to flirt with Binger. Zhou Weiqing's expression darkened, and he remained silent for a while. He had no intention of letting the disrespect slide. Therefore, he placed a hand on the man's shoulder before labeling the latter a genuine pain in the ass and delivered a savage punch to the man's face. The man crashed to the ground a few meters away, bearing the weight of Zhou Weiqing's wrathful strike. Seething with anger, Zhou Weiqing's minions were startled by the sudden eruption of violence. The stranger, now reeling in pain, coughed violently, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Zhou Weiqing, unyielding, stood firm, appalled that someone would harbor such malicious intentions toward Binger. Despite the impolite man cursing him for being a commoner and yet daring to strike him, Zhou Weiqing's ire burned hotter. The stranger, despite his injuries, audaciously threatened to make Zhou Weiqing's life difficult at the academy by invoking the might of the Ye family. Introducing himself as Ye Lu, he commanded those around him to stand up for him, asserting his status as their master. Ye Lu, championing the honor of the Ye family, demanded that the crowd teach Zhou Weiqing a lesson for daring to offend their esteemed lineage. However, Zhou Weiqing remained unimpressed, questioning the true power of the Ye family. His minions stepped forward, providing valuable information on the hierarchical nobility within the academy, with the Ye family reigning supreme. The head of the Ye family, now the prime minister and a duke, held sway over the institution. Acknowledging this insight, Zhou Weiqing remained undeterred. Unfazed by Ye Lu's threats, Zhou Weiqing's resolve held firm. Ye Lu, seeking to make an example out of Zhou Weiqing, pressed on, determined to mete out a lesson. However, Zhou Weiqing observed something unsettling. Ye Lu's minions bore the dark seals of slavery on their bodies, revealing their complete subservience to the noble family. Ye Lu then ordered his strongest minion to deliver a beating to Zhou Weiqing, with the minion apologizing before proceeding. The man calmly explained that he was compelled to offend Zhou Weiqing, having been left with no other choice. Zhou Weiqing had accepted the man's explanation and was getting ready to rumble, when to his surprise, Binger stepped forward, offering to fight alongside her boyfriend. Expressing his disgust for those who became pawns of the nobles merely for money, Zhou Weiqing's minion, Ha Chu, also volunteered to join the fray. Another recruit among the newcomers expressed a desire to participate. Despite being outnumbered, Zhou Weiqing's group stood firm and resolute, ready for the impending fight. Ye Lu commended their unwavering determination to fight, even as the realization of their dire circumstances set in. Simultaneously, one of the recruits reported the impending clash to a teacher, urging intervention. However, the teacher declined, choosing to turn a blind eye to the situation to avoid offending the Ye family. Ye Lu, undeterred, ordered his minion, Ding Chen, to teach Zhou Weiqing a lesson, but with a gentle hand when it came to Binger. In a tense standoff, Ding Chen attempted to convince Zhou Weiqing to apologize to Ye Lu. However, Zhou Weiqing retorted defiantly, expressing his reluctance to become a dog like Ding Chen, questioning the true motives behind his attempts to sway him. Ding Chen seethed with anger at Zhou Weiqing's cutting remarks. Unfazed, Zhou Weiqing continued to taunt Ding Chen, questioning the remnants of the latter's self-respect. He expressed surprise that those willingly accepting the darkness seals still had any semblance of dignity. In response, Ding Chen released his heavenly energy, his physical jewels resonating with the pure strength attributes similar to Zhou Weiqing's. In the blink of an eye, Ding Chen lunged at Zhou Weiqing, winding up for a powerful blow. Yet Zhou Weiqing skillfully countered the attack, turning Ding Chen's aggression against him. The collision sent shockwaves through the air and the surroundings, scattering debris around them. Ding Chen was taken aback and could not comprehend Zhou Weiqing's unexpected strength. Despite being a three-jeweled heavenly jewel master, Ding Chen found himself overpowered by Zhou Weiqing, who seemed to possess the same impossibly rare pure strength attribute. Ding Chen's right arm, previously employed in the attack, was now completely numb, a condition which rendered him incapable of launching another assault. As Zhou Weiqing closed in, a sudden interruption occurred and the latter delivered his trademark kick. Ding Chen attempted to guard against the impending strike, but the force was too overwhelming and instantly propelled him away. Ding Chen's eyes went blank, and foam appeared at the corner of his mouth. On the sidelines, Ma Kun observed Ding Chen's defeat, realizing the gravity of the situation. Seizing the opportunity for a mic drop moment, Zhou Weiqing declared that it was not Ding Chen's fault for choosing to become a dog. However, it was the latter's fault for trying to mess with him. Ding Chen crashed on the ground several meters away and remained motionless, having been knocked out. His fellow minions exclaimed in shock because of how fast he had been defeated. Considering both opponents possessed 3 pure strength attribute jewels, they realized that Zhou Weiqing was on a completely different level. One of them quickly ordered Ding Chen to be taken away for treatment. Zhou Weiqing had not only retreated but began insulting them, calling them cowards who had volunteered to become slaves. Afterward, he said fighting them would only serve to get his hands dirty. Ye Lu was utterly perplexed by the outcome of the fight. He wondered what was wrong with Ding Cheng, because he thought the latter was quite powerful. At that moment, Zhou Weiqing appeared before Ye Lu, with his entire body engulfed in heavenly energy. His sudden appearance caused Ye Lu to panic. As a result, the latter's retreat caused him to fall while still trying to scurry away. Ye Lu felt Zhou Weiqing's enormous killing intent, which caused him to stammer, asking what Zhou Weiqing wanted. With a cold glare, Zhou Weiqing asked him to take it easy because he would be unharmed. He then requested Ye Luo to pass a message along to his boss, asking the latter not to send a coward to confront him. As soon as he received the message, Ye Lu quickly stood up and rushed away to deliver Zhou Weiqing's message. After the group of noble minions had departed, Zhou Weiqing remained with his classmates, who were all commoners. He addressed them, saying he could not manage the senior students. However, he intended to stay in the class for a few years. The atmosphere around him turned chilly, and his face darkened. He addressed them, saying that if there was anyone who wanted to lick the boots of the nobles, they ought to leave the class and never appear in front of him again. Otherwise, he would not show them any mercy. The other students stood perplexed. One of them readily asked Zhou Weiqing on what basis the latter thought he could decide the fates of others. However, Zhou Weiqing simply shook his fist and said the basis was the fact that he possessed big fists. Afterward, he asked whether his challenger agreed with him. His response caused Ma Kun to sigh awkwardly. Binger intervened and asked Zhou Weiqing not to act that way because they were all classmates. In response, Zhou Weiqing argued he had to be tough precisely because they were all classmates. With righteous indignation, he raised his voice and addressed his classmates, saying, as individuals, they ought to hold their heads high and live righteously. Otherwise, they should not dare to think about becoming strong. He informed them they would become slaves for life if they accepted the darkness seal. As such, he did not wish for any of them to become enslaved to the nobles. As he spoke, Zhou Weiqing took out his prepaid card, which contained all the money he had earned from the skill-storing palace. He then asked for confirmation of his question about the commoners wanting to rely on the nobles because they were poor. Afterward, the boy held the card high in the air and disclosed that it possessed 400,000 gold coins, with which he could provide for everyone present. He would not allow or require any of them to sell their souls to anyone. Afterward, he promised to cover all the expenses pertaining to inscribing new skills. Zhou Weiqing confidently added that if the money were insufficient, he would earn some more later. Finally, he expressed his only hope was that the next 4 years would see them all live with their heads held high, and not become any noble's dog. After his speech seemed to have moved the masses, he turned toward his earlier challenger, and asked whether his words bore any weight. However, his challenger was still skeptical. He explained that although the money would be enough for inscribing skills, it would likely be insufficient for them to acquire solidating equipment. Zhou Weiqing looked at him with a confident smile and reiterated his intention to provide for everyone present. Moreover, the cost of acquiring consolidating equipment scrolls was a minor deal for him. Afterward, he turned to his minion and asked whether the latter trusted him. Ku Rui replied affirmatively. Later, Zhou Weiqing handed over a scroll to his minion and his challenger nearby, asking whether they knew what it was. The two immediately recognized it as the manifestation paper used in the creation of consolidating equipment scrolls. Before they could utter another word, Zhou Weiqing cheerfully asked Ku Rui and the other guy to flatten the paper and lift it for everyone to see. He then took out his inscription brush, channeled his heavenly energy into it, and said his words were not simply hollow. He said he would provide for them. Therefore, he intended to showcase his skills so that everyone could rest assured. The unused scroll was held upright, and some within the crowd wondered whether Zhou Weiqing intended to create a consolidating equipment scroll right before their eyes. Others wondered whether Zhou Weiqing needed a draft beforehand. However, their speculations were laid to rest when Zhou Weiqing swiftly and elegantly inscribed a pattern that he was all too familiar with. Ma Kun gazed in astonishment, and he was not alone. The crowd had yet to see a consolidating equipment scroll being created, much less at such a speed. The audience quickly realized that Zhou Weiqing was not an amateur. It had only been a moment, but the scroll was almost complete. After several breaths' worth of time, Zhou Weiqing lifted his brush and declared that he had completed the task. As if right on cue, the completed scroll released a dazzling golden light, which was an indication of success. It was then that everyone realized what Zhou Weiqing meant when he said the cost of consolidating equipment would not be an issue for him. It was because he was a consolidating equipment scrollmaster at the intermediate level. Having demonstrated the creation of a consolidating equipment scroll right before the crowd, Zhou Weiqing no longer faced any opposition. Within a short period, the commoner students' doubts were replaced with profound feeling of awe and admiration. Once again, Zhou Weiqing promised to provide for them and asked whether they were willing to believe him. Addressing his newfound followers, Zhou Weiqing also promised that not only would he provide for them, but he wanted them to hold their heads high. He would not allow anyone to bully them ever again. As he witnessed the confidence that he had inspired in them in full display, Zhou Weiqing smiled contentedly and urged them to maintain that spirit before saying that a man ought to have some backbone. The uplifting moment was interrupted by the slow, rhythmic clap of an elderly man, who repeated Zhou Weiqing's words, encouraging his peers to live with their heads held high. He expressed support for their motto and said the youth ought to possess such courage and spirit. Afterward, the man inquired whether the lad before him was Zhou Weiqing, before saying that the latter had caught his interest. He then asked the boy to look for him if the latter encountered any trouble. Zhou Weiqing had a puzzled expression and inquired about the identity of the elderly gentleman. In response, his minion, Ku Rui, explained that the man was the director of student affairs at the military academy. The director's name was Xiao Shi. At that moment of realization, Zhou Weiqing rushed forward and prostrated at the man's feet like a hungry cat. He was clearly putting up an act, posing like a helpless commoner and asking the director for his assistance in seeking justice. The boy tearfully accused the seniors of bullying the commoners. His tears streamed from his eyes like a fountain. He explained he was in the wrong for beating up a senior in self-defense. However, he did not have any other option. The shameless act took both of Zhou Weiqing's minions aback. Binger, too, sighed in exasperation. She had long grown accustomed to Zhou Weiqing's shameless antics from time to time. The director sighed inwardly while recognizing that Zhou Weiqing was by no means weak. Even so, he decided to be flexible because Zhou Weiqing was a genius who knew how to admit when he was wrong. After considering everything, Director Shi found no reason not to help the boy. He then asked Zhou Weiqing to stand, assuring the boy that he would not be blamed for his actions. Moreover, the director promised to severely punish the students who had bullied Zhou Weiqing and his classmates. In response, the boy was grateful and said he was lucky to be able to attend the best academy on the continent. Moreover, it was his good fortune to meet a teacher as good as the director. Sometime later, as the director departed, Zhou Weiqing gave him a respectful bow and wished him a safe trip, promising a visit when he had the time. Afterward, he turned to his minions and instantly dropped the act, which left them with mixed feelings. Once again, his face turned serious as he brought up the main topic. He then asked whether anyone had any objection if he became the class president. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air in objection. Before Zhou Weiqing, Manhua was the approaching figure. She wore a confident smile and crossed her arms as she asked how they could decide who they could elect a class president without her consent. Recalling their previous conflict, Zhou Weiqing wondered why Manhua had come to cause trouble for him once again at school. Zhou Weiqing then questioned her identity and why she spoke so boldly. In response, Manhua confidently replied that she could make such a decision because she was their homeroom teacher. The response left Zhou Weiqing wide-eyed. Manhua complimented the boy for his earlier speech. However, she insisted that the class president ought to be elected through a voting process. Moreover, she smugly declared that as the homeroom teacher, she was required to maintain fairness in the entire process. Zhou Weiqing was informed that he could not use force to get votes. While he was still hung up on the fact that the stubborn girl he had fought against earlier was actually his new homeroom teacher, he was drowning in disbelief, especially because Manhua did not look much older than his classmates. Right then, he realized that he had fought against a teacher even before he had officially begun his studies, and a sense of dread washed over him. The students recognized Manhua immediately and wondered why someone of her status had chosen to become the head teacher of the commoner class. Kang Lang silently thought that the nobles of the academy would have a challenging year ahead with the combined presence of Zhou Weiqing and Manhua. Manhua continued lecturing Zhou Weiqing, explaining that the class president ought to win over the people by virtue. Zhou Weiqing, on the other hand, reluctantly agreed with her. He sighed inwardly with relief because Manhua did not have any intention of causing any problems for him because of their earlier conflict. A while later, the opening ceremony finally began, and no one discussed the previous fights anymore. The members of the faculty each had a chance to deliver a speech. The student affairs director, the dean, and all other high-ranking staffers had an opportunity to encourage the freshmen. Zhou Weiqing's minion, Cao Rui, explained that the dean was named Kai Kai, and she was the younger sister of Fei Li's emperor. She was also the vice commander of the imperial army. Ku Rui also included a rumor about the dean's dubious relationship with the war god, Ming Yu. The opening ceremony was lengthy, even after the speeches from the directors. Elsewhere, at the skill-storing palace in the city, a slender and fair-skinned pair of legs walked toward the entrance. The mysterious figure of a young lady had appeared. She had long white hair and bright purple eyes radiating with power. She walked barefoot and leisurely ascended the steps leading to the guarded entrance. Her presence was overbearing as she maintained the swirling mass of heavenly energy around her body. Soon the guards at the entrance asked her to present her physical jewels for identification. However, the power within the girl's eyes fluctuated. She hypnotized the guards in an instant and casually walked past them. Her destination appeared to be the king-level heavenly beast enclosures, having hypnotized the attendant responsible for them. With confident strides, she marched toward the beast enclosures against a torrential wave of aura and killing intent released by the heavenly beast within.